and we are recording. For everyone on BitChute and Rumble and Spotify, you're getting it today, Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021 at 3:10 p.m. Eastern Time. For all of those of you on YouTube, I can't post there because I have a week suspension for posting wrongthink. And so unfortunately, the tech overlords have deemed that I was naughty and I discussed wrongthink, and I should be ashamed of myself. And I think I'll shortly be reassigned to a gulag. But until then, let's fucking party it up. So introduce yourself, man.
I'm David O'Neill. I've been focusing on China for over 5 years now, since I had a very rude awakening. And I'd just like to say, I was so nervous that I was going to be the one that gets you like suspended or messes up your channel. So I am so happy that I can blame former CIA on that. And it wasn't me. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't even here. But that's essentially my background coming into this. Is I got my start in entertainment, mainly working in Asia. I was also planning to, back when I was black-pilled, thinking it was either going to be like Hillary Clinton or a New York Democrat taking over the country. I did my dive master in the Philippines, and I was planning to just bail out of the country and go live in Southeast Asia, and I was just going to go.
The map. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my plan. But then Trump won, and I saw some people getting up and wanting to fight it. And so now I'm back home trying to get my family prepared for everything that's happening. But for me, the big wake up call that kind of threw me into the culture war while everyone else was still figuring out is I was in mainland China in 2015, just outside of Macau, for what's called the China International Circus Festival.
Okay.
And when I was there, this whole thing was just like a case study on the corruption of communism. They had hired, it was only the second year they were doing it. They had overhired a ton of acts. I was basically redundant personnel, just confined to a hotel for about a month. And I was told from the managers there that, yeah, they're just overhiring people so that they could jack up the budget in the first few years. So later on, they cut it down and pocket the rest. And during my time there, this is when President Xi Jinping was meeting with President Ma of Taiwan in Singapore. First meeting since like 1950. It was a really big deal. And I was sitting, in my hotel room, and I'm watching CNN, because really the only two English channels I could watch is like CNN and MTV, during this whole speech. And I'm, just drinking scotch because I've got no work, nothing really to do. And it was the most weird experience I'd ever seen in my life, because Xi Jinping's talking, everything's fine. The camera cuts over to Ma of Taiwan. It doesn't even cut to commercial. The screen just goes black. You're not allowed to see it.
Fuck.
You are not allowed to see it. And when I turned on MTV, they had, some kind of video music award, whatever the hell they have going on. And it was like the censors were playing whack-a-mole with cleavage, like trying to blur out all the cleavage. And they were doing a really bad job at it too. We'd go, and everything about this circus festivals, there's copy and paste in hotels from all over. There's basically a copy and paste of the Atlantis. We'd go in to sit in and listen to these officials give a talk, and it'd get translated through 2 or 3 different languages, and you just hear these strange titles like, this is the minister of countering like pornography and censorship, just weird stuff like that. And so at that point in time, I was just like, holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
We cannot ever allow this to come back to the United States. We cannot ever allow that to happen here.
Yeah.
And as soon as I came home, it seemed like it was like that, objects in the mirror are a lot closer than they appear. Like I felt like I was getting chased home by this stuff.
Creeping in.
Yeah. And so that was kind of like my big wake up call to what we're now calling the culture war. And that's why I found you through Don the Pleb. And it's one of the reasons I really like his line. This isn't a conversation, it's a war, because that is very much what's going on. The people we're fighting are essentially, they're theater nerds with law degrees. They operate through post-truth politics, and that they use is essentially their version of takia, lying to the infidel. Mm-hmm. And once they believe that you're in that club and whatever, they just believe, because everyone's always been lying about politics, they can sell you whatever line they think will accomplish their goal. And that's the way that they operate now. And that's the kind of enemy that we're fighting now.
And it's very easy, especially if you can convince yourself that the other side is, it's like Don always shits on me because, I'm always like, can't we agree to disagree? And he's like, dude, they don't look at you the same way. And so
they don't.
Whereas I'm like, my buddy Ernie that comes on, I'm like, hey, Ernie, he's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. I'm like, I agree. And Ernie is a respectful guy. but then you look at the other side and it's like they just carte blanche. It's like, "You're a fucking Nazi, shut up." And it's like, "Well, can I present my argument?" And it's, "Shut up, fascist." And it's like, "Oh, you've already reduced me
Yeah,
to a Nazi in your mind."
they have a formula, a strategy, and a game plan, and they're simply executing.
Mhm.
And that's essentially when we're looking at the upper end of the foreign policy establishment that runs things, and essentially the green NGOs. I call them the watermelon communists, because you'll meet these people that work for the Green Party. I know a politician, or I should say, I did know him. He works for the Green Party in Australia. And I was an atheist back then, and I didn't believe in anything like demonic possession. But I remember we were talking one time, and he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that I, as a libertarian, enjoyed Rage Against the Machine music. And so he's like trying to sell me on communism because I like Rage Against the Machine. And the subject of the Constitution came up, and I mean, he just started like foaming at the mouth, like he understood that the Constitution is the one thing in the world that is in between them and being able to knock over the concept
Global
of
domination.
liberty, and yeah, and getting into global domination. It's like he understood at that very moment that that's the one column they need to knock out from under us to get their goal. And I it was this was before, like, the whole culture war escalated too. I want to say this was probably 2012. We're just starting to see it kind of come out. They weren't quite knives out for us right yet. It was back, like, yeah, he's a Bernie bro, he'll talk about why we should have socialized medicine, but they're not like red guards coming to kill you yet. But that was the first time I really saw these people like will foam at the mouth when the actual hardcore radicals are out there that are fully of the mindset the kulaks deserve it. If you
Yeah. Oh,
push these people, that's what they will say.
oh, yeah, no, it's I mean, I had that first brush in college. I mean, I graduated in 2013. That was the first time where, I'd get pissed drunk, and I mean, I think I've been skewed because I have liberal friends who are, I guess are not, they're not radical. They really are just you and me, and
Yeah,
and I talk to them. They're doctors, they're lawyers, and we could get drunk and talk, but every once in a while, I'd realize there'd be someone else at a party, maybe someone's girlfriend or boyfriend, and the conversation, and finally, it kind of concludes to be like, "Hey man, I think it's just agree to disagree, like let's smoke to that," and instead it would be like, "No," and they would just start and you're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," you're like, what's going on?" And it's like, "Shut up, no," and you're just like, "Oh, whoa, there is nothing outside of this for you.
yeah,
This is, you truly, I mean, I guess you got to respect your enemy that their propaganda is that good. I mean, how else are you going to go storm the beaches of Normandy? I mean, you have to truly believe that they're Nazis, and they were. But man, there's no agree to disagree. There's screaming, "Shut up, censor, censor, block him out. He is dangerous. Fuck you." And it's just like, dude, there's no self-awareness there.
yeah. What we're talking about, when we're talking about like our liberal friends and everything, I like to call it the shadow of Woodstock. These are just peace, love, and dope kind of hippie types. And if you really push them, they'll kind of come back to the libertarian end of things.
Yeah.
Not ANCAP, but like what used to be the
Yeah.
libertarian end before we started playing all these word games. But they have been wound tighter and tighter over the years because you have this group of green communists that understand fully how their messaging affects people. And that's essentially how the foreign policy establishment and our senior executive service uh, grooms the people that are going to be in the establishment, because they're sending their kids off to university. I know you're well read up on a lot of, I don't know if you're into like Jim Mars and stuff like that, but I know
Mhm.
you're pretty
Trillion
into
trillion dollar
the
conspiracy.
that what we're dealing with is like it's Iran Contra, the next generation. It's always the next generation. They keep it in the family for the most part. And they have these kids, they send them off, they're getting international studies degrees, and they go off and they do a gap year somewhere, working for NGOs and whatnot. And somehow the Chinese will always end up paying an absurd amount of money for these kids to go around and teach peasants in the third world how to use compost toilets and whatnot, paying absurd prices for PVC. And one of someone that's in charge of that operation has an uncle or someone in the State Department. It always kind of comes back to that. And the way that they use this process to figure out who's going to be in the club is Thucydides' trap. And this is how they morally justify this in their head as well. Thucydides' trap says that if we have a rising power, which is China, and it challenges us, we're going to have a war.
Mhm.
Any international studies, scholars just going to tell you that's most likely going to happen. And they believe in their mind that the only ethical and moral thing to do is to sell this country out and make sure that China can rise peacefully. So
Mhm.
that is the mindset of the foreign policy elite of how they genuinely think that they are doing the right thing by selling this country out. And because of the fact that they are in what we call the senior executive service, everyone likes to throw around this term deep state this, deep state that. They are doing this. Listen, Christopher Wray over at the FBI, he's a drunk. Okay, he probably has 3 cocktails before he shows up to work after noon. All right, we saw what he was doing then, and we see what he's doing now. He's never done anything. All the people that run this government, you ask a politician something, they divert you to the press secretary. The press secretary says, I'll circle back. And what they're circling to is, if you open up what we call the plum book, or the official United States policy and supporting positions, I think is the official title. It's also called the plum book, very easily accessible. You get the whole list of all these policy experts, theater nerds with law degrees that are the blob, what Obama called the blob, because he's coming in saying, we can run on change and everything. And then he gets surrounded, and all of a sudden his foreign policy looks like everyone else. And going back to like a continuation of what I call a continuation of the 30 Years' War, which was all about the centralization of the printing press, Martin Luther and all that stuff. You had the Jesuits, which was like the Vatican Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and they would manage all these Habsburg princelings. They would raise them, educate them, and that's how they would essentially conduct their foreign policy to maintain hegemony and control over everyone else. And that's what we see happening here with the senior executive service, which is really a case study in elite capture. I mean, we in the foreign policy community and intelligence community, you hear them talk about elite capture all the time. Well, just look at who runs all of our institutions, and we never hear about them. The average person, I say senior executive service, they're like, what is that? They've
My
never heard of it. But
my
these are the guys, they all make 6 figures. They're unfireable. And I'm not saying that there aren't like maybe 2.5 of them that, earned their place there at a meritorious service. I don't know who they are. They might exist, but, for the most part, these people are selected to gatekeep our elite foreign policy establishment and domestic policy establishment, to facilitate the peaceful rise of China. And
Mhm.
that's why we see them, basically, letting the Chinese into our power grid, and like we've seen with Texas, they really hate the idea that we could have a decentralized power grid. I'd like to have Florida kind of hook up with Texas and form a Gulf Coast alliance, and
Fuck yeah.
peace out. I call that my Fortress Florida policy. And the Chinese would hate that. And the reason that they're able to do this, which is led to my comment on Claire's video, is really that the gun to our head that they can justify, well, we have to let this happen, are things like the Club K missile system. Missiles disguised as shipping containers, because our military, kind of has an outdated policy of mutually assured destruction. We're still thinking that the nuclear trinity from Dr. Strangelove. We got the
Mhm.
bomber in the air, we got the subs down here,
And the
and,
missiles,
and
yeah.
yeah, and the missiles in the silos. But when you have like low profile Belt and Road foreign policy, that can really be putting these containers anywhere. They could be off the coast on a ship, they could be staged in the Caribbean. um, there's so many places that these things can be, that this is a literal gun against our head. And our treasonous foreign policy elites are like, well, what else are we going to do? um
Now, do you think in two things? One, yeah, the senior executive service. We'll circle back to we'll circle back to it.
yeah.
I would like to think I'm pretty well read on like the Cold War and shit. But I remember when you told me that like a week ago, I was like, don't hate me, but I don't know what that is. So for everyone listening, we'll get back to that. But on the side, yeah, the Club K missile system, which is going to be a Claire episode, I think 2 weeks from tomorrow, is it's nuclear tipped cruise missiles in containers that you can put it on all the ports. Now, do you think that there's an equivalent? Do you think that I don't? It's not that I deny that that exists. I think that absolutely exists, and I agree with you. I think we absolutely have a gun to our head. Do you think that we don't also have a gun to their head? Do you think maybe we have,
Oh
nuclear
well,
weapons within mainland China
well,
ready
I,
to
I
go off?
If not that, I mean, definitely,
Space
space
based
weapon, yeah, space-based weapon platforms
rods from
can get,
God.
yeah, rod, I'm told the rods from God thing is a little outdated now, but yeah,
Yeah,
we,
Tianjin.
we do have ways that we could counter that, but the question is, do we have a way to neutralize the ones in our backyard? The way I kind of um look at our position right now and where we're playing catch up. I don't know if you're familiar with like the history of the Akula submarine, but I think it was like it was the Alan Walker or the John Walker spy ring. Essentially, we had a spy ring that let the Russians know, hey, the entire United States government has these hydrophone networks. We can hear your wheels captivating
Uh-huh.
underwater. It means they're moving so fast they're making bubbles. And if you are a Russian admiral in charge of making sure that we have mutually assured destruction capabilities and nukes that the Americans don't know about, the last thing that you want to hear
That we hear
is
you.
that we could possibly know where all your submarines are. And so they went into overdrive, understanding that they were behind in this fight. And so they ended up doing a lot of espionage, getting machines from Toshiba. If you look back, there was I want to say there was like a congressman or whatever that was like, burning or smashing a Toshiba radio when we found out that they had gotten, I guess, some tooling equipment from Toshiba. But long story short is they managed to pump out the Akula class submarine way quicker than anyone in the United States intelligence community anticipated, because they understood that they were behind the game. And if you go to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, where they had, I think it was like the vice chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the title of the thing was called like Missile Defense and Defeat or something like that. And listening to the whole thing, there's not a whole lot of valuable, because he's just like, I can't talk about classified material. But what struck me about the whole thing is, normally when you listen to military guys talk, it's like compartmentalize this, compartmentalize that. I know when you're talking about the CIA, you like this mansion has many rooms kind of thing.
I don't. Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting about that is, I've never heard a military officer use the term holistic so much in my life. He kept throwing out the term holistic, and he kept emphasizing, how do we deal with this? There's no lines and borders anymore. Like, how do we deal with that? And I was just like, well, I mean, a little late to the party, but I'm glad they're getting there.
Knocking on it
I'm
now.
really glad they're getting there.
Do you think that so one of my guilty pleasures is I love reading about the Strategic Defense Initiative, and the thing that really offset it was when Reagan visited NORAD for the first time, and they're showing him like how quickly we can just vaporize all the Soviet Union, and he, you know, great, what's our defense? And they're like, well, nothing. Like we have some bunkers, and you'll be able to wait it out there. I mean, and so will your great grandkids. But no, we can't actually stop them. It's all based on mutually assured destruction. And he was terrified at it. Not that he said that we can't actually stop them. Part of me almost gets a little bit of comfort from that, because although the Chinese may have a gun to our head with the Club K missile system, it might be that we've always had guns to our head and we have guns to their head. And yes, there is nothing we can do to stop the Club K missile system, in the same way that Reagan realized there's nothing we can do to stop a mutually assured destruction. Might be the pinnacle of global security.
Yeah, well, it is, and there's no way to get around that. My biggest fear is that we're no longer necessarily dealing with independent state actors,
Mm,
and that we're dealing more with a kind of dark coalition
mm.
that is attempting to leverage us. That's going beyond, say, just the Chinese capabilities. This is why I talked about very briefly, the concept of, and this is why I think you should probably reach out and talk to George Webb, because he goes back through all the history of this and what he calls these guys, a lot of them white Russians with chips on their shoulders, and like Ukrainian Azov battalion guys. And when we talk about these Ukrainian Azov units, we're talking about the fact that under the Obama administration, we straight up funded and supported, full on Nazis. And I don't mean like the Antifa, oh, that guy likes the Constitution, he's Nazi. I mean, these people, they believe the only thing Hitler did wrong is that he, didn't finish the job. Okay, that's the kind of, and they're not, in their defense, these are Western Ukrainians that remember the Holodomor, and they really have it, you study what was going on during the Ukraine crisis, before things really, kicked up, they were also passing like anti-Russian language discrimination laws. And of course, in Crimea, I forget if it's 20,000 or 30,000, military personnel they have already there. And they have families there. They have a naval tradition of being in this region and serving the Russian state through the Navy there. And they were passing these anti-Russian discrimination laws. Like everything about the Ukraine crisis played right into Putin's hands. And a large part of that comes from the fact that our think tank institutions, our Brookings Institute, their little lawfare section, which, by the way, if I went into any foreign country and I opened an organization called Lawfare and I started like hiring former military officers that like took a swing at the president, like Vindman, and started having a bunch of lawyers figure out how we could dismantle the country, I'm pretty sure I would be put up against the wall and shot, like anywhere else if I did that. But here it's all right if we go down that road.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't be. No, they wouldn't give you the decency of the wall.
Yeah,
You'd be done. But yeah, it seems, and we've talked about it more and more, that there does seem to be this sort of, and not just the sense of, oh, the deep state, but really like there is this sort of hidden thing below the surface, and they're not loyal to a country. Even, I get caught up a lot in, rah rah, fuck the commies. But I mean, even I know when I actually, get serious, the quote unquote commies, they're just another front. It is the core of this, whatever this group is, the Illuminati, the cabal, whatever, is its power and power alone. If they have to dance with the commie flag or they have to dance with the American flag, they'll do it. But there's an entrenched power structure and nothing's off the table.
yeah. It's 100%, the doctrine of unrestricted warfare. But the thing is, I wouldn't even say that it is hidden. Where I get most of my research is I go on to academia.edu and I read papers from what I like to call psychopaths with PhDs. And if you understand the language of academia and you understand that, their terminology and how they would describe things is not what, an average person would use, you will see everything that these guys are doing. There was a project called the Mexico Indigena Project. I'm butchering the name because it's got all kinds of accents and whatnot. But essentially, it came out of the University of Kansas with defense spending and whatnot. And the goal was essentially to map agriculture farms and the human terrain of Mexico. And so what we ended up seeing there, if you read the language of some of these papers, what they'll make it almost sounds like they're fighting communism, because they're talking about like neoliberalism and liberalism and the end of societal community farms and whatnot. But we know that they don't fight communism. We know that they're about mapping the human terrain so that they can control it. So if you go through and you read any of those papers and you just understand that when they say liberal or neoliberal, what they're really talking about is their technocratic regime and whatever that will one day look like. If they have to paint the communist red over it, they will. If they have to paint anything else over it, they will. It doesn't matter to them. But they're not going after communists or society farming. They're going after families and how to centralize those families. And the reason we never heard about that project then is because they already have such leverage over your paramilitary units that you would use to enforce that, your cartels and whatnot. And they're professional, and you only hear about them when they decide to put garbage bags of bodies on someone's porch to leave a message. But now we're starting to see that same formula that they used in Mexico. You see that now happening in India. Greta got kind of hit for leaking the activist toolkit and whatnot.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, yeah, you're going to need to rile up some Antifa thugs, and they're not going to be as effective as, say, a cartel, hit squad. But guess what? If you get enough, Antifa thugs to think of it like a denial of service attack, if you can tax the state security response to the point where they can't actually handle everything, and then say I bring in a bunch of Ukrainian Azov guys or some guys that actually will, chop dudes up and send a message. Well, it doesn't matter if your teenage, rabble are effective. They're just a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the tool of how this operates and what they are doing to set up these distraction organizations so that they can move in other elements to take advantage of that disruption.
Can we, man, I can't like not think about it anytime I say circle back. But I'm like, fuck, they've ruined it. They've ruined that, and they ruined pizza. Can we I don't even know if that's a topic yet that we can't talk about. Because the episode I just did with a lawyer, 379, that one I won't be able to upload to YouTube. This one I think we're good so far. But even now I pointed out to her, I was like, isn't it weird how you can already start to see where they hoped it would go, in that their censorship now affects my own self-censorship. But luckily I have Rumble and BitChute, and I just say, well, I'm just going to upload it to those, and so we can still do the full episode. But I'm rambling. Can we go to the senior executive service?
Yeah.
Can we educate me on that? Because I love learning about all this shit, and that's something that I truly didn't know about.
I mean, to really understand what they do and how they're effective, we have to think of it in terms of game theory.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially the same way that you would look at, say, a whale going to a casino. A whale goes to a casino, they negotiate they can bend the rules a little bit to facilitate the outcome that they want. And that's really what the senior executive service is all about. Is they are the ones writing policy. They are the ones, that are advising clerks on writing policy. They are the ones that are bringing these politicians that have to circle back into these meetings and explaining to them what the greater good is. I'm sorry, but listen, we have to facilitate the peaceful rise of China, or we're going to end up in a nuclear conflict and everyone's going to die. The planet depends on you doing the right thing, and we need you to go beyond saving your country and save the world. And that's the way these people think. It's not like there are, don't get me wrong, there are total sociopaths and psychopaths out there that know what they're doing, and they're out there. But the best asset that you can recruit is somebody that doesn't realize they're an asset, because that person's going to pass a polygraph every time.
Yeah.
You're never going to have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So, and that's why the watermelon communists, the green communists, are so perfect, because you convince these, you get these people in the concluded little cells, you're moving them overseas, they're building up camaraderie, they're all about saving the planet, and then at the same time you're feeding them, well, look at these people over here, they hate the planet, they're going to get us all killed. These people genuinely believe that the world's going to end. You're creating essentially death cults out of these organizations. And then you're shoveling them into policy positions. And so it's pretty self-explanatory when a crisis happens and all of a sudden our power grid is completely compromised by a bunch of clowns and malicious actors who are like, I'm sorry that the windmills aren't enough to power the state of Texas. How dare you want to depend on fossil fuels though? Grandma, she's breathing out carbon. She doesn't need to heat. We'd be better off without her, honestly. And that's the way these people think at the most disgusting level. That is their mindset.
Yeah. And there's a good quote, the most dangerous man is the man who knows he's right. And it's not that the man who is right,
the path to hell.
It's that the man who knows, it's whether or not that he truthfully knows, but he knows he's doing it for the greater good. He knows he's doing it. That's the person that, man, it's one thing if you're just doing a job, you're just conscripted and you're a mercenary. It's another thing if you're a radical and you truly believe what you're doing, because it's kind of like the polygraph ish. It's you believe in your heart what you're doing is right. Now with how do you say it? The Thucydides
trap.
Thucydides. Yeah, I know what it is. I just can't pronounce it because I'm a retard. But like the Thucydides trap. Now, do you think, let's just play devil's advocate. Do you think that allowing the peaceful, because it's weird, because I didn't know this, but in Annie Jacobson's book DARPA, The Pentagon's Brain, which is very good. And I know not everybody likes Annie Jacobson. I like her, but she's got a sexy voice. But her book DARPA, The Pentagon's Brain, they talk about, I didn't know this, but right after World War II, for like 2 or 3 years after, because who is it? Who's the head of the KGB that really pushed forward the atomic bomb test? Not important, but we thought about, there was actually open discussion first, within the military, but then publicly, about nuking the Soviet Union before they could get the nuke, because the idea was there will never be a a power dominance like there is in the world right now being 1945, 46, 47, 48, up until 49 when they fuck, I'm having a brain fart, when the Soviets detonated Joe 1, their first fission bomb. The United States debated, should we just go in and nuke the Soviets so that,
Preemptive threat reduction. Yeah.
and then anytime anyone ever tries to even start building a nuke, we'll nuke them. And then the idea was, hey, we have to decide whether or not we're going to do this, because once they get it, this leg up is never going to exist again. The Soviets detonated their bomb years before we thought they would. We picked it up with a sniffer plane off the coast of Alaska, and all of a sudden that option was gone. Now, there was no fear of a Thucydides trap about, what about the Soviets? We need to squash them. No, that was America being, maybe I'm brainwashed, but that was America not being evil. If the Chinese get ahead of us, they're not going to be worried about the peaceful rise of America. They're going to squash. So why?
Yeah, they're
Now, do you
they're
think
100% realists.
so? So I say all of that to say this: is it on one hand that we have treasonous assets in our government and senior executive service that are loyal to China, and they're playing the card of, we need to avoid global war? Which, okay, I'll take that as like a,
That's the best case optimist. They believe in what they're doing. Card.
Well, next best case is, are they not Chinese assets? Is this really the bleeding edge of like war games in the Pentagon, in the bunker under the Pentagon, where they're realizing we have to have an equal rise of China, and that's the best outcome? I mean, let's just go really full doe-eyed optimist. Could it be that this is the best thing for America, is to let China rise to a superpower, and then we see them eye to eye, and then we just basically have Cold War II?
I don't think that that's a really effective way to view things. I was watching my foreign policy daddy, John Mearsheimer. He was I guess you could say it was like kind of like a debate, but it was a conference or whatever. I guess it was intended for a bunch of like Navy midshipmen. And sitting next to him was basically a colleague of his that kind of comes from the Francis Fukuyama neoliberal mindset. And I thought it was really hilarious watching John just straight up say, you guys bet wrong. You guys thought that the policy of engagement was with China was going to open them up, and that we were going to all have peace, love, and dope. And you guys bet wrong. And the look of fear on this man's face, like this wasn't he wasn't defensive about it. He wasn't angry about it. You could genuinely tell that this guy was deeply troubled over like his optimism versus of how he thought this was going to go with China with where we're at now. And I've seen numerous of these very old school diplomats going before think tanks and talking about the policy of engagement, and you can tell their voices shaking, like they are genuinely troubled by their approach with China. I think the only way that we can really have a peaceful, even a peaceful, more conventional security competition with China is through the destruction of the Chinese Communist Party. There's no other way about that, because as long as that's there, that's the training camp that all the like say radicals going somewhere else to train somewhere. Well, that's where all of our elites, the Kissinger school of thought, that's where they can go to their Plato Republic, and they have a black box base of operations to test anything out that they want to bring home and use on us, and that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah, man, and I'm wearing it now, my Alex Jones hoodie. It's everyone.
You can't see it, but there's an InfoWars sticker on my mic.
Yeah, he my favorite quote of his was, I think his second time on Joe Rogan, episode 1455, I think. But I remember one line he said that stuck out for me, and it wasn't like the vampire potbelly goblins, but it was that China is just it's like a sandbox for the elites. They go there, and it's their system big enough, 1.3 billion. It has 1.3 billion variables, so the system is big enough and diverse enough that you can start to get some accurate outcomes. It's like a simulator. So they go there and they run the simulation. They go, what would happen? What would happen? And they're running the simulation there. But if that's the case, so this is where I guess my mind comes to kind of a crossroads, because let's say they don't want necessarily a peaceful rise of China. They want China to surpass the U.S. and then they can jump ship, go to China, and be part of the dominant team. So let's say that is the end game, is they want to be on the elite dominant team.
The breakaway civilization. Yeah.
Yes. Wouldn't it be, couldn't they cut out the middle ground and just take over? Why wouldn't they just, if they're in first place in the United States, why allow China to go from second to first and then jump on board first? Why not take the place that's already first? Why would
Well,
they not just dominate from there? Or is it because we're based on an open society and they know the way to rule a world is you got to go full communist, Chinese
yeah,
Communist Party?
yeah. They understand that the only way that they can do this is to basically use China as a hub to retake the West from. When I say the West, I don't just mean the U.S. They want the EU. They want to take out Britain along with them, where our liberal ideals came from, the Magna Carta and all that. And that's essentially what it goes back to. I sent you some documents on this
Mm-hmm.
going back to like the 17th century,
Mm-hmm.
of Jesuits. This is when right now the world financial powers are kind of split between Wall Street, New York, and the city of London.
Mm-hmm.
And back at this period of time, it was Amsterdam. It wasn't quite
Mm-hmm.
moved over. We're still kind of in the 30 Years War and the Anglo-Dutch wars and whatnot that would kind of facilitate that, William and the House of Orange. But what was really important back then is these Jesuits, as they're going to China, mapping everything out. And that's what the Jesuits really did. That's why I call them the original geospatial intelligence agency, because if you study the history of map making, it's all about these guys were all, they're soldiers trained as spies pretending to be priests. And they're
Yeah.
going into
Brilliant.
countries and they're
Brilliant.
learning the language, they're learning how to work with these tribes, they're learning how to subvert these tribes, and they're mapping all the territory. They're the original intelligence community. And
Brilliant.
you can see what they're writing about, back to, the Dutch merchants, and the elites of Amsterdam, which came from Venice. Before it was in Amsterdam, it was in Venice. And they're talking, very plainly that the Chinese system would be the easiest adapted, to a Plato style republic. And so that has kind of always been the goal of, I would call it more or less the old school blue blood aristocracy and old money, is they've always understood that as America's breaking away, they didn't have the security forces to lock down the American continent. They knew that they were going to lose that. And so the question is, how do we get that back? And, there's also a lot of history of how the Jesuits were involved in our American Civil War. Very interested in how can they divide and conquer us and eventually get us back under the thumb of, the hegemonic power structure. And so this has been a plan a long time coming. It has just
Okay.
been basically taked off the bookshelf from guys like Kissinger and said, okay, this is what we're going to flesh out, and we're going to execute this strategy.
Okay, it's starting. Okay, I'm starting to piece it together now. Okay, yeah, America, it took off. It got bigger than they could control, and it was kind of a. They started it as a bonfire, and it turned
How
into
do
a
we get
forest.
it back?
They
Yeah.
went fuck. It turned into a forest fire, so they did the next best thing. They came over here, took it over from within. You could see the single superpower. The 50s, 60s, really like glory days. Strategic Air Command,
Yeah.
nuclear bunkers, Chrome Dome. Were running the world. And now they're going, okay, but now we've taken control of this forest fire, but now we need to steal this. How do we
Well,
do this?
I would
We
say
take
even
use
further
China.
back than that. Really, they were trying to capture us. 1913, the Federal Reserve.
Absolutely.
Once they realized that, hey, what's the best way that we could utilize, this bonfire that we have? Well, let's turn them into a mercenary force,
Mm-hmm.
to win our wars. And
Smedley Butler,
yeah,
baby.
Smedley Butler and all that. And if you look at what they're doing to our military now, it's a mercenary pipeline. Okay,
Absolutely.
it's entirely incentivized to get you in to build a resume that you could be a mercenary at, and then they want to put you in lipstick and high heels or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, you could be making six figures if you were in the private sector. So it's almost like they're discouraging us from having our own security forces, and
Yeah.
they're purely incentivizing creating a mercenary force, which, to an extent, I somewhat agree with. Whether you love guys like Eric Prince or hate them, when you
That's how
look
the
at
world works.
Yeah, that's how the world works. Before the 17th century military revolution, which came along with the 30 Years' War, it was 100% private military contractors and
Yeah.
organizations. And really, when you look at it now, we call it the Five Eyes, but we really, if
Yeah.
we know if anything goes through the Five Eyes, it's going to be, well, Israel, China, and through all that, it's going to be everyone else. So, anything that goes through them is compromised and gone already. There's too many leaks in that ship. So,
Hmm.
really the only guys who are capable of executing a solid foreign policy are private military, organizations that can operate outside of that chain of command. And that's why we see, if you look at what Eric Prince was doing with Frontier Services Group, he's either the master of keep your friends close and your enemies closer, or he's the wildest mercenary the world has ever seen, because this company was part, I don't know how this worked, but this company was part Chinese owned when he was running it. Okay. And he's getting all kinds of, mercenaries, defense
U.S.
contractors,
contractor,
and they're
Blackwater
running through
XE.
Africa. They're running through Venezuela. They're basically joint at the hip. And to an extent, it's kind of a smart idea, because if you ask me, what's the best way to take down China?
How do you
Well,
control it?
yeah,
Yeah.
how do you control them? Well, the best way to set them up to fail would be to lead these guys into the middle of Africa, have them build a bunch of infrastructure, and then peace out, have, defend it
Ice it.
yourself, you know?
Yeah, ice it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some brilliance in that, man. And it's like what Comstock said. He said, when you get to the uppermost echelons, he said, it's a foggy forest of mirrors. Because I
Yeah.
remember I asked him, I was like, man, CIA Special Activities Division, that's the tip of the spear, right? And he was like, yeah, I remember when I got into Delta and I was like, this is the most elite thing. He's like, and you hear like whispers of CIA SAD. Then, they recruit from DevGru and Delta. And I remember I asked him this past summer, I was like, Dale, I was like, what's above it? What's above CIA SAD? It's just like, come on, Dale. I had known Dale for like 2 months at that point, but
That's a problem, because whatever that is, they changed the name probably twice a week.
there's no name, right? There's no. By the time you figured it out, it's gone.
Yeah, they're spray painting new numbers on those planes every day,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, yeah. And I remember I asked him, and he said mercenary work, and I was
Yeah,
like, and that was
that's it.
that was kind of a lackluster response, because I was like, what, like mercenary? And I remember he called me and he goes, mercenary work. He goes, not Blackwater. He goes, none of that pussy shit. And I was like, man, if you call Blackwater pussy, Dale's an animal. But he goes, it's mercenary work. He goes, your clients are other nations. And I was like, what? And he goes, the shit I used to do for and he's gonna write a book on it. Obviously, literally everything has changed about it, but he was like, the shit you would, he's like, he's like, Delta, you go into an operation, you go on a blacked out C-130, and then 160th SOAR takes you in. He's like, CIA SAD, he's like, they insert you, as a front, you go over there with like Walmart or something, right? And it's like you're a spy. He was like, mercenary work. He's like, man, you pack your bags from your own home, you go to the airport, they fly you over to Heathrow, and then you take a connecting flight to Paris, and in Paris you get on some little puddle jumper, you go somewhere else, you get off and you go buy some clothes out in some small town, and then you go get on a bus, and a bus takes you out to a helicopter in a hill. That helicopter takes you out to somewhere or in somewhere in the Middle East. He goes, you get off there, they give you, you get, you're met, and there's a dead drop of like cash. You go to the black market, you buy the gun and the robes there. He goes, there is zero footprint. He goes, it's true James Bond shit. And I remember thinking, I was like, holy fuck. And he's like, if it's Delta and DevGru, he was like, that's not the tip, because that's still has America on it. He was like, he's like, solo mercenary work is the absolute. He's like, that is the blackest of the black ops. But so then it comes down, like you said, it's, wasn't that line from, was the movie Sicario, the movie all about,
Sicario.
yeah, but they just, I know there's the great scene where they're at the
That
border. I've never watched the whole movie. I've just watched
oh,
the clips on YouTube.
by the way, the ending, one of my favorite endings.
Oh, where he kills the family.
Yeah,
I love I love the breakdown of that scene, and someone's like, it's brilliant, because notice, kills the mother first, then kills the kids, because no mother should have to watch her kids die. And I was like, that is smart. And then you wait and let the husband kind of watch. But point
finish
is,
your meal. Yeah,
yeah, and finish your meal. But like, keep eating. But like, at the very end, or there's a line in it, maybe it's in the second one, I don't know. I've never watched the full movie, but there's a line in it, and they're talking about like all the cartels warring, and so there's like someone finds out a thread, and they're like, what's this CIA doing here? And and someone says, and they're like, don't you understand that like the best case scenario is when all the cartels are working together, because it's much easier to keep one organization under your thumb than a bunch. And it's like, that's a dirty, brutal answer, but in
Hmm.
the world of realism and the worlds of James Jesus Angleton, they look at it as how the world is. They're not optimist retards like I am. So if we're looking at something like China and we're like, they have a Club K missile system to our head, and we've probably got some fucking, yeah, rods of God, that's old school. We've got some directed energy bullshit. I think Elon Musk Starlink, if you don't think that's a Trojan horse for the Space Force, I mean,
Hey,
God,
Elon's going to be dropping cars on people. All right.
Elon's going to
So,
be dropping cars. It doesn't matter. They're still
hey,
coming in at terminal velocity. But I mean,
it'll work.
it'll work. But I was thinking, man, I was like, I bet if you get into the uppermost echelons, they come in and they're like Agent Musk, and it's like, because what does he have? He has a link of satellites around the globe. Don't try to tell me that's not a weapon system. Fuck you. But not you in particular. I mean, like,
I know.
but like, no, you in particular. And you're like, Tommy, I never said anything about Starlink, and I'm like, no. But foaming at the mouth about Starlink the same way that guy was foaming about the Constitution. But if you wanted to control your enemy, instead of just trying to kind of go the whole Cold War route where it's like, we will meet them on every front, it's like, that sounds great and all, but what's the more realistic way? Fuck, is you get some mercenary company and you go, hey, China, do you want to go do some Belt and Road Initiative? And China's all like, ching, ching, chong. And then they're like, well, then now I'm going to get banned. But like, you do that, but then you just control the mercenary group. Hey, did you disappear, man? Oh, no, you're back. I think you're back. You're freezing up, David. I think David's freezing up on me. David. Sorry for everybody listening. I don't know what the fuck just happened. David? David, you still there?
Oh, I think we're back.
Yeah, what happened? Was that me or you?
No, I think that was me. It says my internet connection was
Okay,
unstable in
yeah.
there for a moment.
Okay, sorry. But no, the way I realized you were still, and I was like, I don't know if I'm just talking a lot or if he's actually brilliant.
I'll just move my head a little bit.
Yeah, just kind of bob and weave. But yeah, how would you keep China under wraps, right?
So the true genius of this, because if you lead China into a place like Africa and you provide the security and you allow them to build a bunch of infrastructure, and then you pull that security rug out from under them, and they have to defend themselves.
Spread thin.
The true genius about that is if you understand Asian culture and how important the concept of saving face is in Asian culture, the idea, if you're dealing with a counterinsurgency situation, you have to accept that. Now, even if you do everything right, eventually some farmer is going to make a fool out of you. All right. It's just going to happen. Some farmer in pajamas is going to do it. And as soon as that happens, I mean, from an American perspective, it's like, all right, that sucked. On to the next one.
On to the next war.
But if you are a Chinese officer per se, and that situation happens to you and you have to save face from that, that is it's like a glass military for them. They would never want to put their own individuals in that position to even risk that. And if they do, they're going to want to keep it real quiet. And that's why, like, when we see, currently the conflict zone, it's really escalating. I've been following this area. I was planning to go on a little scuba vacation there right before COVID hit, and it completely ruined all my plans. I had all the little journalists I wanted to interview and everything all planned out. But I wanted to go to Mozambique because right now what we're seeing in northern Mozambique, Cabo Delgado region, there's a massive escalating insurgency. And part of the reason is they found a massive amount of natural gas that they can get out of there. Exxon is the one that basically the majority of that contract there. And if you know the history in Mozambique, it's nonstop civil war. The government is far from centralized. There's no centralized military. There's militias around in these local areas. A lot of them don't even speak the same language. I remember I was looking at like a language map, and it's just like, if you had to recruit interpreters or anything to actually try to talk to these people or whatnot, it would just be insane because none of them really do speak the same language. Even if you got some guy that speaks, Portuguese really well, and then the African dialect and all that, you're still going to be a huge issue. And so the government with, the centralized government's based out of far south, and Cabo Delgado is in the far north. And so they're seeing all these, essentially foreign contractors getting rich. They don't feel like they're getting the kind of development in their community they need. That some of them are getting displaced from this. And I want to say that it's probably Qatar that's providing some of the funding and everything, because we're seeing, radical clerics come down from Somalia and start to kind of create this Al Shabaab ISIS hybrid fusion thing, whatever they want to call it. But, we're seeing all kinds of things. There were Russian mercenary units that were originally trying to put it down. Media will say that they're Wagner, but as far as I'm aware, Wagner as an institution, they're persona non grata, and all the good ones got put in the groups like Patriot and some of the higher tier Russian PMCs, and whoever's left from the Wagner days is kind of they good luck to them. They're not in high demand anymore, but they really got their snouts smacked and trying to handle the situation in Mozambique. And now we're starting to see like Chinese vehicles popping up there. Saw an MRAP pop up there with the RPG round stuck up, but didn't explode, just stuck right in the side of the top of like the MRAP.
It's always good.
So yeah, it's a really quickly developing conflict zone in Mozambique, and which traditionally is a heroin economy, was like your black tar and stuff coming out of Afghanistan through Pakistan, the Gwadar area of Balochistan specifically. And they would run these things down on 60-foot dhows, very small amounts at a time, not too many eggs in one basket. And Mozambique was essentially like the Amazon warehouse where all the decentralized packages are put back together. And then they would move it over to South Africa, where essentially Chinese banking and everything would deal with, putting industrial side payloads onto shipping containers. And I don't know if they're going to the U.S. I know they were trying to go to the U.S. Didn't quite work out yet, but it was mainly into the mainland Europe supply. And that was the way it was done before. But now we see all these Chinese fishing fleets that show up and everything. And so they facilitate, and when I say fishing fleets, I mean, they get around fishing laws by never going into dock. They have resupply and everything at sea. And so they show up and they can run fentanyl at a much higher rate than your old Afghan black tar. Yeah. In the Dow. There's so many of them. It's a lot harder to intercept. And if you do, you're dealing with potentially an incident with China. And on top of that, they're facilitating all kinds of other black market trade going on there. For example, I know the wood trade, they're cutting down a lot of trees and facilitating the wood trade, so they can be coming over moving fentanyl or other things in, cheap booze. I know the North Koreans, they like to piggyback off of what the Chinese are doing, and they'll be filling up little Smirnoff bottles with, homemade hooch or whatever and trying to pass that, but, they'll be coming in, offloading, heroin and taking back wood or something like that. And, you see, and that's really how we see Chinese diplomacy nowadays. And that goes into where we see in the Caribbean how they're moving in there. They have a much lower profile. When we look at Gwadar, Balochistan / Pakistan, we can see they're building a Chinese colony there. You can see that from, there's papers on it. You can see it from the satellites. We know when they're building in Africa, we can see all the infrastructure and whatnot. But as they're moving into the Caribbean, what we end up seeing there is they don't need to build roads. They don't need to build all this big infrastructure, and they get by more off of clout than cash, because we don't really have a good foreign policy on the Caribbean. And just the fact that Xi Jinping will call up a lot of the people that run these little countries and will talk to them one-on-one, it just puts in a lot more legwork, and they're just happy to hear from somebody
to be on the world stage.
Yeah, to be on the world stage. And what indirectly ends up happening, we won't really, or I should say the United States won't really pick up on it until they decide to do a deal and build some big megaport down there. But what's happening right now is, as they're buddying up to all these little islands and everything and giving them a taste of the world stage and a little bit more to first class treatment, they're creating a competitive environment where now all these little islands are trying to compete. Well, how can we be the ones to get the superport? How can we get the Chinese superport? And that game's already happening as we speak, and that's why we need to be a lot more proactive about monitoring, Chinese Belt and Road options, because most of the time we don't really talk about or even notice it until they've already built something massive.
Now, okay, now let's go even deeper. Is the game plan let China go through with their Belt and Road Initiative and then force them to either have to spread? Okay, actually, okay, maybe it's kind of fucking coming together. China's doing their Belt and Road Initiative, and they're using Eric Prince in their and Blackwater, where the fuck its name now, XE, or even who knows what the fuck it is.
I don't know, because he sold out of his position in Frontier Service when Hong Kong started
Mercenary Corp.
cracking down. Yeah, when Hong Kong got, as far as I'm aware of how this worked out, when Hong Kong was getting the screws tightened, so to speak, he pulled everything out of there. And as far as I'm, they closed up shop of what Frontier Services Group is. But it doesn't really matter, because Eric Prince has, so the people that work for Eric Prince, they don't care what name is on the paperwork or the plane. They work for Eric Prince, so it doesn't really matter as long as he has some kind of foreign royalty to home base out of. He's
it's a shell game. It doesn't fucking matter.
It doesn't matter what name's on the paperwork. It's a nomenclature game.
Yeah. So whatever. We'll just call it Mercenary Corp. We'll just call it Blackwater for the sake of no, because I don't want that to get fucked.
Well, I go back to St. Augustinian thought, which I just think all government, it doesn't matter what window dressing, what you want to put up on it, is comprised of pimps, mercenaries, and whores. These are the oldest professions on the planet. They're never going anywhere. They're always going to be here. And anytime we try to pretend that the world is not run by these three elements is when we're convinced the devil doesn't exist, and the pimps will start selling us out and start acting in ways that are not in our national interest.
Yeah, right.
And so that's why we have to learn. That's why I always say, like, we need to stop using the term deep state, and we need to start opening up the plum book and saying, hey, who's the senior executive that is in charge of writing these policies? Who's on that team? Because these guys, you have to think of them all like general flag officers. When you see any of these guys in that book, you have to understand they have a whole command under them.
Yeah.
Essentially, I call it the lawfare and barratry regiments.
So for the record, I'm not suicidal. Just in case.
Me either. I'm a narcissist, and if I'm backed into a corner, I'd like to think I'm going down in a fight. So like I have no intention of shooting myself in the back of the head twice or three times or however many.
Yeah. I see. This is what I tell people as I lost a sibling to suicide in 2014. My parents can't go through that again, so I truly can't be suicidal. So if I'm killed, it's a senior executive service.
Yeah, but one of them.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm gonna fucking hire Dale and Ted to do. They're gonna be, Tommy, where are you broadcasting from? And I'll be like, who knows? I'll be using VPNs behind VPNs. But however, we'll call it Eric Prince. Doesn't matter. Man,
one guy, yeah.
It doesn't matter. I was just thinking of this now. So what do? You have China with all this trillions of dollars, and whether or not it's not inflated or manipulated, whatever, they're willing to do the Belt and Road Initiative. We know what that's all about. It's about providing ports. It's about providing all these services, infrastructure, apartments, modern amenities to third world nations. And then when they can't pay for it, you go, hey, don't worry about it, but just let us come in and build a port here. And next thing you know, China's putting ports all over the world. Eventually, they're probably going to try to get up to Cuba. We're going to have a Cuban Missile Crisis Part 2. However,
we're already kind of there. It's just so low. Well, yeah, and it's already the problem is because they haven't built a super port or anything. We're the elites of our foreign policy establishment are kind of blind to it, because we don't really engage with the Caribbean the same way we engage with people that we consider are strategically relevant. And so we're not really monitoring it on the same level that we're monitoring what we do consider strategically relevant. And that's the biggest problem is, the only people that are really working in these areas are your watermelon green NGO types, and they're not on our side.
Yeah. So, but let's think. So let's say China's doing this whole thing and they're building all this very expensive shit. What if this is the moonshot part 2? Whether or not, I think we went to the moon. I had a guy on that went to the moon. Some people don't like that. Whatever. Let's say it's unimportant whether or not we went to the moon. What did it actually do? It bankrupted the Soviets. A lot of other things did too. So did Reagan's space race. But let's just say the main goal of the moon was to bankrupt the Soviets, right? It's not a nuke. It's not a new aircraft carrier. It's the most brilliantly concocted thing. They tried to go to the moon and they couldn't afford it. What if what we're doing is we're getting China, they're going the only way unrestricted warfare. They're looking at the warring states period, and they're like, the only way we can take on an American hegemon is by doing the Belt and Road Initiative, spending $3 trillion over 20 years to do it. What if we know that's happening, right? China builds it all. We know that back to what you said, they don't want to put their glass military out there. So we put out, again, mercenaries, kind of like what Eric Weinstein said the other day on Lex Friedman. He was like, a lot of people, like myself included, are given hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, and they're all bots, so that the powers that be or whoever can pull them away whenever they want. So it makes it look like, it's kind of like deactivating,
Pull
like
the rug out from under
we're
you.
seeing
Yeah.
Cuomo, right? Cuomo is being deactivated right now,
Yes.
right? So
I love watching him
it's
implode,
it's
by the way.
it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. But let's go with this. We provide through whatever Eric Prince, under the notion of, I'm not working with America, I'm a private corporation. China's like, we've got the money, so they're like, hey, we'll just have Eric Prince and co. defend all of our Belt and Road initiatives. We're going to drop $2-3 trillion, but it's going to be worth it. Little do they know, in 2038, whatever, all of a sudden we pull the mercenaries, and now they've got trillions of dollars of infrastructure that they either have to defend and spread their military thin, or they're not going to defend, and now they've just lost trillions of dollars. Is this just a long con, beautiful chess move?
It's all about luring the enemy to overextend and catching that hyperextension. Have you ever done martial arts or anything like that? If you can get the hyperextension in the elbow, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get them to overreach with that whole thing. My argument, though, is money is almost completely irrelevant at this point. The idea that we're thinking about like the US
real.
dollar. Yeah. The reason I don't care about it is like, I watched the financial crash of 2008, and like I've been on top of people shorting stocks since then, and I view it's like if you're not into crypto and silver right now, you're behind the ball. But not to get into the finances, but the entire reason is it's not about money, it's about energy and whether or not that they can extract and utilize the energy needed. And the way that they're doing this is essentially along the string of pearls that
David froze up again. David froze up again. Froze up again, my friend. I'll have to message him again. Sorry for everybody listening. Our internets are dropping out. Wait, is he back? I can hear him. He's breaking in and out. David? I think we lost him. Wait. There he is. He's back
there
again.
we go. Yep.
No, yeah, sorry. You were saying string of pearls?
Yeah, so along the string of pearls, their entire goal, and this is what we kind of need to worry about countering them on, because they're already aware of the fact that they don't want to have to defend stuff on land in Africa. No one wants to do that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely no one in their right mind would want to do that.
Yeah.
So they mostly want to do it offshore. And the way we see them doing this is if you look at like BWXT style micro reactors, that's the company that basically makes like the submarine reactors and whatnot. And by the way, very interesting to note, if you look at their stock history, they were recently shorted. They were one of the stocks being shorted around the same time that Trump was talking about the potential for micronuclear reactors and Space Force and powering things in space with it. They were heavily being shorted, but China uses a very similar micro reactor essentially to his, because really for fracking, you're boiling water essentially, as George Webb, he always calls it the coffee maker. And I really like that term for it. But they're building these little string of pearls, and all you need is a little micro reactor and essentially a jet engine, and you have a fracking operation that you can, pipe energy out and take it home essentially. And so Exxon is set up to essentially to tap the well, get it up and out, and boom, it's off to a facility they have in China ready to go. And so that's the name of the game. Is it's not about money, because it doesn't matter if they run out of money. It matters about energy, and that's why they're so focused on our energy grid.
Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of what I'm getting to, though, is like so energy, right? Well, energy can take different forms, and what you could say another form of energy is like, creating like steel girders. Let's just use that as an example, because that takes a bunch of energy to do, right? So it's even though you have this thing and it's not necessarily like a battery, but it's still kind of this thing that took energy to make, right? It's you're putting a ball on top of a shelf that now holds potential energy, and it costs you kinetic energy. So the Belt and Road Initiative, let's say they're building it. So it's not about, I agree with you, it's not about the money, because that's just fucking monopoly. It doesn't matter. You print it out. It's the idea that money power is like, no, dude, power comes from the barrel of a gun, not from a fucking rectangle note made out of, cottonous paper.
Only thing Mao got right.
Exactly. It's very useful if you can get people to believe that's where power comes from. But it's like Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, and I gave you a small fortune. Like, does that give you power? And it's like you realize like, oh,
Yeah.
there is no power in that. But however, so let's go back to energy. So it's not about how many trillions of dollars it takes, but if they're building physical ports and infrastructure and apartments and everything they're doing, if they're building that, that takes energy. For pulling the ore out, melting it, smelting it, transporting it, and
Hmm.
creating it. In a way, you could say that that is energy, and thus, if we can get them to expend all of that, and it might not be some coup where then we pull Eric Prince and then we go, ha, we get everything you just built. It might not even be us taking it. We might just leave it. Doesn't matter. The fact is it costs so much energy. It's kind of like if you go to China, if you're a U.S. company and you go to China, you have to build a factory. So even if you leave, you've now left that brick and mortar factory. They kind of have you by the balls before you even start. So what if that's what we're doing is get them to go build a ton of shit and then they can't defend it? That still
Yeah.
cost energy for them to make. Or we
Yeah.
get
That,
them
that
to just
and that is the play, and that's, it really is. I couldn't come up with a better play myself if I sat here all day. The best thing that you could hope for them to do is to expend all their resources
yes,
in Africa
build all
and
that
build up
shit.
Africa, and then have to defend it, because they won't be able to do it. It's
Yeah.
just,
Well, again,
if
think moonshot Soviet. Sorry, I know I'm
uh,
interrupting you. We get excited, but it's like moonshot Soviet. It's not that the rubles it's what's going to take down the Soviets. No, but if they have to put all of their fucking rocket scientists and defense, if they have to take all their ore, right? They have to use everything to make that, kind of like Chernobyl, like the HBO miniseries. Like, we need the liquid nitrogen. How much? All of it. All of the liquid nitrogen in the Soviet
yeah,
Union. Like,
literally all of it.
there is a real cost. There is a real politic cost to the physical reality of. So if they go, yeah, if they go build all of it, so it's not that the ruble brought them down. It's that they put all this money into making the Buran Energy or whatever fucking thing they did. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I get excited.
Oh, it's no problem. I listen. I'm happy to have people to enjoy talking geopolitics, because I'll try to
You're right.
explain this. I'll try to explain this to like Gen Xers, and they claim they're not boomers, but they're boomers in every sense of the word, and they just, their eyes just glaze over. It's like you try to explain like balance of power politics in World War I. Well, American history doesn't really start until World War II, and everything else is mythology.
World War
Essentially for most of these people.
American history started on July 4th, 1776, and then like going under anesthesia for surgery.
Well, it's like mythology at this point to most people.
Yeah, it went from 1776, and then there was a literal tear in space time, and the next instant was December 7th,
World War II,
1941, and that's where in America started. It
Yeah.
just in the beginning, FDR said, "Let there be a War Powers Act," and and it was good, and now we have America.
Well, this is why, like I say, the way that we think about history is wrong, because Americans think about history as a series of what we call them wars, but really they're battles. I will firmly state that we're in nonstop the continuation of the 30 Years War, and that goes way back. And America has been this country that has won almost every battle, but we haven't even realized what war we're in for the most part. That's the average American mindset, and that's what we need to start countering. That's why I like guys like Don the Pleb saying this is a war, not a conversation, and we need to start not only waking up the average American, but walking them off of the weather balloons and swamp gas in DC and onto the senior executive service in McLean, Virginia, because those are the policymakers that are controlling everything.
Yeah. If we can, yeah, I mean, it is a little black pillish, but it's like, man, if you can vote them out, that's probably
Yeah.
not the House of Power.
Yeah,
Let's
and
call it
that's the
what it
thing.
is.
We can't vote the senior executive
Yeah.
service out, and we can't fire them. So all that we can do is start. There's power in names. Name the demon. We need to start talking about them rather than the politicians, and we need to socially engineer a non-permissive environment where they either have to conform to a populist foreign policy and a populist domestic policy, or they need to pack their bags up and go to the country they want to serve. That's the only way that we can get out of this situation without it devolving into a justice system from south of the border and people's entire families getting honored with pyres of tires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and we've talked about it. That's my whole psychedelic initiative, which I believe is going to be the ace up my sleeve that I think will be played. But we'll get into that in another episode. It's
Yeah, I don't want to mix geopolitics and
Yeah.
all the woo woo too
The
much,
woo
but
woo. Yeah. No.
I would be happy to talk that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. But you got to kind of compartment. It's again.
Yeah.
It's the podcast is a big mansion, and I know not all the rooms. You gotta pull a little Jesus.
Yeah, you gotta treat your audience
You gotta know
what
what
they're coming for. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, you can't. You gotta. Yeah, you're getting a product. If you're paying for a hand job, you're getting a
Yeah,
hand job.
the guy coming to the geopolitics video might not want to talk about what's going on at
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
MK Ultra house. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. But it seems like, man, I was thinking. We see something. If I don't know if you've read Stealth War by General Spalding. It's all about
I
China.
I follow China Uncensored and China Unscripted a lot, and the fact that you had Spalding on, like he's one of the guys out there that's definitely he's leading edge on what we need to be focusing on
He's the
and
OG.
getting our mindset into. So I'm very happy that you've had him on, and
Yeah.
that's definitely the kind of people that we need right now.
I've been trying to get him back on, but he's playing hard to get. He's
China's the dominating issue of today, so I'm sure he's in high demand.
Yeah. But I tried to get him to get me Michael Pillsbury, because he also works at the Hudson Institute, the author of the 100-Year Marathon, but I never heard back from him. But point being is, so he talks about a lot. He's like, let's just look at, and what I love Spalding is he's not, I mean, he is a diehard patriot, but he's also not delusional. He very much, he says hundreds of times in the book, you have to respect your enemy. You have to, and he says right in like the first 3 sentences, he's like, they're waging a beautiful war. But he talks about one thing they do is like, what you do have with a Chinese Communist Party, which is essentially one big corporation, right? It's all danced around. If you have a board of directors and over a certain amount of revenue, no, sorry, if you just have a board of directors, you have to have a member of the CCP on there. And what China can do is they can take money from other avenues and they can artificially push new ones. So what they're doing is they kind of can use their corporations as all one big machine. I was thinking, man, I would imagine that ExxonMobil, I mean, let's think Independence Day, right? Not even trying to go down the alien rabbit hole, but I mean, what is Independence Day, right? They come to different planets and they suck out all the energy so that they can keep moving forward. Man, I would say ExxonMobil is definitely like an arm of the Department of Defense. It is the battery.
I mean,
battery.
You can look up, just their job titles alone, and it will match. Hey, we need an intelligence officer for this, that. Then listen, Lockheed has a bigger espionage and covert, clandestine service than CIA. So let's.
If you think the NSA isn't meeting with the CEOs of Lockheed and going, "This is what you need to work on," let's not try to pretend that there is no such thing as corporate espionage.
Well, it's incentivized, because if they do anything through the official, government institution, that's subject to FOIA. Now, granted, they're going to do everything they can to not, respond to your FOIA request. But if we do it through a private company, it's not subject to FOIA. And so that's why it's like we've set up the game. The policy has been written up to incentivize mercenaries.
Yes.
100%, and not in our interest. That's the biggest problem. Is it is incentivizing our mercenaries to go and serve foreign aristocracies and whatnot. And that's the issue that we have today.
Or is this just let's just toy with this? Is this just Cold War II? And are we just seeing like a newer iPhone or a newer Xbox? Are we just seeing Double Agent 2.0, where we create mercenaries and we go, if you want, you can go work for China, and China goes, haha, we got your guy. In reality, this guy's like, all right, I'm in position.
Well, it's definitely a mix of that, and we see the same, and we know it's going that way overall, because we see the same thing happening from the Russian standpoint. They are very much moving into the same kind of means of, we have our military for state defense, but we're also shoveling a lot of these guys over into what was formerly, media likes to throw around the term Wagner as if it's like the Russian Blackwater. But there's a lot of these little companies out there, and that really is just the future is, not, no uniforms, no nothing like that. And it's old boys networks, and how you know that you can trust someone? Well, you worked with them enough that they haven't shot you in the back of the head yet, and that's probably the best you're going to get.
Yeah, but it almost seems like it's the same power structure, though. So it's whether or not they have flags on their shoulders that says, Special Detachment Delta, or whether or not it just says ExxonMobil.
Well, to an extent, things are only going to change so much when it comes to the structure of how you're going to run one of these organizations. I know, Jay Dyer, I don't know if you're familiar with his work at all, but he's a power nerd at going through all these, old books and whatnot. Really, really good take on like the KGB and how they were working with the Orthodox Church, and how you kind of had this network of Orthodox Christians that were understanding that, hey, you know what, the best way to get out from under the thumb of this, this communist dictatorship that's taken over our country is to work through these Orthodox community networks. And that was essentially from, to say the good guys of the KGB is a pretty odd statement to make, but that's kind of what it was, is the good guys of the KGB and Russian special operations forces saying, the best way that we can stabilize this country and get out from under the thumb of tyranny is using these Orthodox Christian networks. And, you go back to like Constantine and why the Roman Empire converted to Christianity. Well, they understood that, hey, these natural insurgent networks that the Christians are forming, these little communities, are responding to external threats on their own much better than our centralized Roman, bureaucracy can. So, why not just control the opposition? The best way to control the opposition is to lead it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We're Christian now. And that's why, was it Julian the Apostate comes along a few emperors later, and he's kind of like an uppity hipster. He wants to go back to paganism, and even the pagans. I'm pretty sure I'm not messing that name up, but I could be. But essentially, his own pagans even hated him because he's like, they're not zealous pagans. They're just like, dude, this is actually working out for us. You're messing this up for everybody. And that's why, like, when he was killed, no one's really sure, was it his own men? Was it the Christians? Was it the pagans? Who did it? No one really knows. Some people claim responsibility because he was rubbing all the feathers backwards, and people understood the real politic that, hey, this Christianity thing's actually kind of working out for us.
Yes, it's working out. It's working out well, right? And it's, man, so I was thinking, now I'm just thinking along all these lines of, man, are all these different American corporations, are these just very intricate I mean, like the oldest one, it's almost beat to death, is like, we know the CIA, I think, formed 10 or 11 fake corporations to go buy up the titanium ore of the Soviet Union so we could build the SR-71 Blackbird, which I love a meme that I shamelessly created. And it's, David, did you freeze up again? Up, David froze up again. Our internet is just shit in the bed today. Is it? I don't think it's my internet. Let's see. So he froze up again.
I think we're back.
Okay.
There we
go. But yeah, I was. It's a meme I shamelessly made. It's Thanos. I use the rings to destroy, or I use the stones to destroy the stones, and it's I use the Soviet soil to spy on the Soviet soil. And it's the titanium ore to make the SR-71. I thought I was clever. I patted myself on the back for that one. Fuck you. But my idea is, man, what if? So let's think. What do we know we have? What is probably, we argue, one of the biggest presences in China? Apple and Foxconn. Do you think Foxconn is? I mean, is that a forward operating base? Is that a CIA station?
Well, we know that obviously there's going to be those networks in there. The big problem is when you look at the Office of Personnel Management hacks and leaks that happen, and this is the biggest issue, is that through that they've compromised and figured out who a lot of the assets were. They got rid of a lot of the assets that have been built up for a long time.
When was this?
This was a few years back.
This one,
look that up.
When all the CIA assets were exposed in China.
Essentially, yeah. This goes back to the Office of Personnel Management hack. And I can
look that up now. 2016.
I want to say it was probably about then.
Okay.
I'm Googling
just general ballpark.
But yeah, general ballpark of it is that they had this breach, and which compromised a lot of the assets that we had there already. And then on top of that, you got to keep in mind that they got material on the people who are polygraphing and basically giving out security clearances. And that goes all the way up to the senior executive service. So that's the biggest threat right there. And that's one of the reasons why anything serious is going to go outside of the official chain of commands, because the people who are giving out the security clearances were essentially compromised. And, when the senior executive service is compromised and they're unfireable, well, what are you going to do but form an East India company or an East China company? And it's like, you need your own chain of command. You need your own, everything.
And then dissolve it every decade and then build it up anew. It's kind of like Jack Nicholson in The Departed. Whenever I got a rat, I just kill everybody.
Exactly. You basically have to just keep doing that, or bouncing between new platforms, because we know the platform that was built up for us is completely compromised from
Yeah,
the ground
rotted
up now.
through. Yeah, termites in the foundation.
Hmm.
Fuck. I mean, yeah, what other spot would you go after other than the polygraph? I mean, that is the gatekeeper. Do you want
Yeah.
to be in this or not?
Yeah, and so if you can compromise and control the counterintelligence, that's why we no longer do counterintelligence, is because all the good counterintelligence officers, well, they're either
They got turned.
retired, they're either retired, gone whistleblower, like Kevin Shipp, who he went on record, I want to say 2012, his book From the Company of Shadows details a lot of, like, when you look at COINTELPRO tactics that they
Mm-hmm.
use to ruin the lives of whistleblowers, to go after your financials, to go after your
Mm-hmm.
family. I believe they went into his home with a paint roller, basically put chemicals on the ceiling and tried to basically poison his family. Like, we're seeing, all of these tactics that they use to destroy whistleblowers. And I believe what they came after him over is he found essentially an exploit that allowed essentially enemy intelligence to determine who in an embassy, or who in the State Department was actually working for the CIA. And when he tried to report that, he was basically told to shut it down. And when he pursued further, they essentially tried to ruin his life and kill him over it. And we're seeing, it's just short of I mean, there's some debate on whether or not binary chemical or biological weapons are in use now against the American people. But we're certainly seeing everything else that they use to destroy whistleblowers being employed against just the average Joe who woke up and is like, why is my country being sold out?
Mm-hmm.
And really, if you study Kevin Shipp's work and all that, they all those tactics started with what they were doing to CIA whistleblowers and whatnot.
Motherfucker. So one thing I always think about is like, I don't think I'm stupid, but I also don't think I'm necessarily smart. Um, I think you and I are
You're
probably,
up there. You're up
yeah.
there.
Oh, stop it, you. But like, oh, you're making me feel like a young girl again. But like, it doesn't serve anyone to think they're smart. That's never done anyone any good. All it does is make you complacent and make you
No, we gotta assume that we're
cocky.
fucked and work our way up from the.
You got to assume that you've got like applesauce spilled down the front of you.
Mhm.
It's that your shoes are untied and your teeth are, you got to floss out the crayons you've been eating, right? So,
Mhm.
but one thing I always think is, if we can think of this, if everything you and I are debating right now, if we can, one, let's just go baseline it. Let's just say there are people in the the upper echelons of whatever, whether or not they're compromised, or they're Chinese, or let's just whoever. Let's just say they're up there. At the very least, if they have carbon copies of our brains, right, and they have the same computing power as us, what they do have an edge on us is access to information and intel. But now let's go a step further. There's probably smarter guys there. So if you got smarter guys who have access to more information than just like the websites you and I can go to, or the Audible books we can fish through, I always think, so if we can conclude this stuff, they can conclude this stuff, which means that they've got to be a step ahead. So do you think everything we're seeing is the picture, or do you think it's what they almost like a limited hangout? Like they want us to believe the Chinese are on the edge of overthrowing America. Like what would be the advantage of that?
I think it's kind of half and half. I think it's half limited hangout, and once again, half the fact that, yeah, we might have a lot of incredibly smart people that understand exactly, you know, how bad the situation is and what we need to do. But it goes back to the argument: if there's a gun against our head, if there's God knows how many Club K missile systems that came in through Port Canaveral and are scattered throughout the inside the continental U.S. And even, like, let's assume that our counterterrorism capabilities are Johnny on the spot, and that there's not a single one inside the continental U.S.
Sure.
Well, just as easily, how easy it is for them to put these on little islands in the Caribbean, put them on a fishing boat, and just be off our coast. Are we going to stop every boat with a container on it? It could be done. Yes, but do I think that they're capable of doing that and actively doing it? Well, judging by how our power grid's being treated, I would assume that there's a gun to whoever the good guys are in the system's head, and that they are very limited in their response. Because what I'm seeing, with our power grid, and from guys like Eric Swallowswell, and all these clearly compromised
Fuck that
people,
piece of shit.
who are just can get away with murder essentially. If we have really smart guys that are out there and figuring out how to get around this, I'd like to meet them because I don't feel like we're winning right now.
Me neither. I don't have that feeling. And it's one thing I always think is though, it's like, you're right, because it does seem like the Chinese are acting like they have a gun to our head. I just don't believe that we don't have a gun to their head as well. And I don't necessarily think that, up until probably the last 20 years, I felt like America was 12 steps ahead. Now I think we're on par at best. I don't think they're ahead of. I don't think the Chinese are ahead of us. I don't think we're necessarily that far ahead of them though. But one thing I always think is, and I remember thinking this back in like middle school. I was like, wouldn't the most advantageous thing you can do, wouldn't it be to just smuggle in pieces of atomic weapons into the nations that you don't like, including those who are your allies, construct them in cities, and then just leave them there for decades? It would have to be a special access program within a special access program, but you would have those. So fuck having an ICBM or a stealth bomber. Just have instantaneous.
You could have that, but the problem is that's really only the capability for A, if you're going to do a preemptive first strike,
Yeah.
or B, responding to, hey, we already got nuked. So, I look at it from that perspective is, do we have, equal measures that could do the same amount of damage? Yes, but that doesn't really help us with
Can't
the
use them.
situation in our own
Can't use them.
backyard.
Yeah.
The only way that's going to help us get around, the issues in our backyard is when we start going to, neighborhood watches that are, forming up, and we start going beyond, hey, let's just watch after our cul-de-sac. How do we, teach these neighborhood watch guys surveillance and counter surveillance techniques? How do we teach them about, counterintelligence? How do we give these guys the resources and the motivation to keep a strict eye on the people running their policy, on the people they vote into office, to keep the pressure on them so that they are forced to act in a populist and nationalist manner? And that's really the only way that we can go about retaking the internal security services needed to start going out and really finding the guns to our head, so to speak. Because we can talk about whether or not we have the on par capability to do as much damage to China as they could do to us, or maybe some white Russian element. However, old nobility, Klaus Schwab, James Bond villain type, whoever you want to name it. But whoever has those weapons there. It doesn't matter if we can nuke the country if they can nuke our city anyway. We got to remove the gun to the head before we can do any other action.
But the thing is it might not be removable, and it might never have been removable. It might have been to our head since 49.
It might not, but and then if that turns out to be the scenario, if there's no other way,
there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. If there's no other way to get around that, well, then the only way that we can deal with this situation is once again going back to force multiplying at the grassroots level, counterintelligence knowledge and procedures, so that we can do network analysis and figure out, well, who's, if we can't remove the gun from the head, can we at least figure out who's got the finger on the trigger?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And go from there. And that's really the only other option there.
Yeah, man, it looks like that ray of sun is piercing your eyes. It's
right. It's kind of
right
starting to come down there.
Yeah, that's I built like a wall of of mats around me. But yeah, it seemed, that's one thing I keep thinking of is like, man, yeah. So what good does it do if China's like, we have a Club K missile system, and then we go meet with Xi and we say, we've had 100 megaton thermonuclear warhead in Beijing since 1972, and we're not, and it's like, oh fuck. Maybe that's always been what it is, and the reality is maybe we facilitated it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we facilitated Club K missile systems, just like the idea that we facilitated getting rid of the Sprint ABM missiles, these missiles that could get up to Mach 10 within 15 seconds and shoot down incoming nuclear weapons or set off a neutron pulse to like disable their fissionable cores. But we actually started taking our own defenses down because we were like, hey, we want you to know that you can destroy us, because they realized that was the most peaceful outcome. We might have facilitated Club K, because it's like, hey, now you have a gun to our head as well. And now that the keel's even, now you don't feel threatened, an inferiority complex.
And that goes back to the Russian penetration of the Manhattan Project and how the OSS was compromised, was there was always this, and I'm kind of almost to the same mentality of, I don't think that hegemony necessarily guarantees security. I think balance of power politics is the only way you can do it. If you have, even a bipolar system or a unipolar system, well, if you have a unipolar system, that country is going to think that they have a blank check to go around, and that's Francis Fukuyama's The End of History. Okay, the wind's at our backs. We can go out and we can form liberal democracies all across the world.
1984.
And so that's that mindset. And if you have a bipolar world, all of a sudden, you're playing these Cold War games and mutually assured destruction arms races. But if you have a multipolar system, that's where you start to get more balance. And that's the big problem that we have right now, is that we don't really have a multipolar system. The EU is collapsing, and thank God, because it's a Stasi-run regime at this point. It's a continuation of the Holy Roman Empire, and it's not Roman, it's not holy, and
it's not an empire.
It's not an empire. It's the guy that made Stuka bombers, as the unelected dude running it. It's arms dealers running that thing.
So that's and now if we want to go really far down the line, and this is one thing I was thinking a while back, because I just like to dive deeper and deeper into conspiracy holes, and not necessarily in some crazy wacky sense, because that's easy. That doesn't take any talent. You can go reptilians from Draco, or okay, fine. That's not fun. Original.
Listen, if you're smoking a joint and you're BSing with your friends, it's fun to go through. But you don't need to make those cases to explain things through the geopolitics lens of what's going on.
That's what I like to get to. So I like to go down the rabbit hole, but I like to create my own conspiracies based on things I know, because otherwise it's a cheap out. It's aliens. It's all right, fun. Yeah, sure. I'll smoke that bong. I'll have fun. But if we really want to debate what's going on, one thing I was thinking is, the Cold War. Let's look at the Cold War as an engine. Right, you kind of fuck around. You could say that in the landscape is the temporal dimension, and we want it to go forward quicker. What's the best way to, right? Why did we set up Los Alamos and Oak Ridge, Tennessee at the same time, or Sandia or whatever? It was, we wanted competition. So let's look at the Cold War as an engine, right? Because it's been argued, and I can't back it up, or somebody fact check me or back me up, but it's roughly that without the Cold War, where we would be right now with even just consumer technology, is we would be at the spin wheel iPod in 2021. As opposed to where we are. So it moved forward. It advanced humanity very far forward. Now it's a dangerous engine, because it's an engine that can, at any moment, it can go thermonuclear. And then let's say without a Cold War, the engine just keeps plugging along. With a Cold War, you can turbocharge that engine, but the engine might also throw you back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
However, so a Cold War might be the upper elite are like, what's the best way to advance humanity? It's a Cold War. Maybe strings are being pulled to purposely pit China and America against each other, because baby, that's how you get technology to jump forward. David, you froze up again. I can't help but feel the senior executive services chopping in our connection. I don't know if it's his or mine. He'll pop up again. It normally takes like 10 seconds. But yeah, what if the Cold War is an engine, and the engine is pulling us along into the future, and it's a knife set? All right, he's back. Yep. All right. Let's is it a intentional Cold War to push humanity forward, and then thus push a breakaway civilization, and then they'll just pit us against each other?
Yeah, that's basic management 101. Let's break it down simple enough for Counter-Strike players, right? If you have a Counter-Strike team and 5 guys, and you want to push them to be better, what's the best way to do that? To make a second Counter-Strike team, to call them a bunch of losers and suckers whenever they mess up. And then you get that competition and that camaraderie that comes from that competition. And next thing you know, you're driving innovation.
All-star team. Yeah.
And that's why, part of this, was a failure of Trump, because he was trying to play it in the political game. But, you could see where his strategy of, well, I want to bring in these guys that disagree with each other. I want to bring in John Bolton and this guy, and I want them to compete because they're going to give me the best outcome. Well, it doesn't work so well in politics, because people already have their allegiances and whatnot. They're not necessarily looking to innovate for you. But, from a business perspective, that's a very smart strategy.
So what if that's the move? What if the real move is hey,
to an extent?
Yeah, and you would have to go
to an extent. The problem is now they feel that they have enough, that they're ready to collapse us, and they want the authoritarian model. And that's the issue we have now.
That might have been we might be behind the 8 ball. They might have had that thought in 49 and go, hey, let's pin us against each other. And now you're right. They've done their advancement. They ended up the Cold War. They tied up the loose ends. And now they're going, all right, let's go get into the Chinese system. Then we'll kill them. And then we'll just take over the whole world.
Yeah. And
Fuck.
at the end of the day, the heart of all this, if you just really want to cut to the heart of everything that is evil in the world, well,
Henry
it all
Kissinger.
starts with Henry Kissinger, is the K, the big K, and you look at all of his acolytes.
I tried to get him
And
on the podcast.
that would be amazing.
He didn't
That,
respond. I think he's like 98.
yeah,
He's
I
the
mean,
secretary.
he's up there. I mean, he is a Sith Lord, though. He might live forever.
He's
But
gonna, yeah.
it's a really interesting thing. But if you look at where he has the strongest foothold, it's Department of Energy. And if you really wanted to end the hegemony of the technocratic, whatever cabal, globalists, whatever you want to call them, if you cracked open black energy projects in the DOE and you removed our dependence on oil and air travel and the lanes that they already control, they're done for. And that's why for them this is a zero-sum adversarial game, and they have no intention of losing control of that. They understand if Elon Musk can go to an asteroid belt and have unlimited resources and just start 3D printing, well, guess what? You now have a near peer threat that can just build off somewhere else in the system that could pose a potential to disrupt your hegemony over the energy game, over the transport game. The Expanse, I don't know how the latest season, but the first couple seasons of The Expanse was actually pretty good, because the whole idea is you had these guys that went to Mars to terraform Mars. And because of how much work went into terraforming Mars and making it a livable place, they were just this incredibly nationalistic. They had this really frontier, hardworking spirit, but they're very cohesive. It's not quite fascist, but it's, it might seem a little fascist just because of that mindset. And then meanwhile on Earth, you kind of have like there's this uppity elite that are kind of running everything, and things look all right. They're behind the ball because they haven't had to work as hard as the Martians. And then the peasant class has just been on UBI for God knows how long, and they're completely out of it.
Yeah.
And that's their biggest fear, really, is some guy like Elon being able to just, hey, I'm going to form my own breakaway civilization. Eventually, he's going to become a near peer threat to their system.
Or they have Elon go build it.
Or they have them already. Yeah.
Yeah, or doesn't say, or they have them all ready, and part of the people in the first colony are going to be fucking like CIA.
They've got the back door in his chip, and they're just ready to activate them. And yeah,
CIA and SAD agents, they're going over there. They're soldiers as spies, as astronauts, right? They're going over there, and as soon as he's got, what I think it's going to come to is we're probably going to see in like the next 20 years some like Elysium type. We're going to see some low Earth like elite getaways, and that's where they're going to rule from, is literally out of our own biosphere. But maybe that's the thing, is you pit this whole thing forward to grow. I mean, and you know what? And this will have to be another podcast for another time, because we got to wrap this one up. But are you okay with wrapping this one up soon?
Oh, yeah.
You sure?
I mean, listen, I'm here. Like, you have me for the rest of the day if you want. If you want to cut it,
Oh, shit. I thought I was keeping you.
Oh, no. For me, the only thing I would be doing for the rest of the day is playing with like rangefinders and wind meters and learning new toys. But, sun's going down. I can do that some other time.
Fuck yeah. So I was thinking like, fuck, what was I going to say? Yeah, so I was thinking, and this is an idea, is the person in charge, or the group in charge, do they even know they're in charge? And I'll set it out as this, and then I got to go piss, so I'm going to give you the screen. But it's like, I'm thinking of like a video game, right? In a video, let's say Far Cry, and I kill all the enemies at an outpost. The game tells me when I killed all of the enemies, so I can stop crouching around. I can stand up and just walk around. That's not the case in the world. So when you get to the top spot, when you have the deepest bunker and the best supercomputer and the most generals on your side, no one goes, you are now in the lead. You don't know. So does the group that's in charge even know they're in charge?
It's about half yes and half no. And the biggest problem that we have with the American kind of system is our patrician class, all of our professional class that have a lot of disposable income and should be steering policy, are essentially asleep at the wheel. They're all like, hey, I've got a bigger boat, I can go fishing, life is good, the golf course is good, and they really don't care. And so the only people that are actively pursuing and really trying to get to the top of our policy establishment are the people who understand what the game is, and they want to be at the top. And so that's essentially where we're at right now, is that we have The people that should be the true elite of the country, the real people that should be steering our policy are just asleep at the wheel, and everyone else is essentially a full on, I call them, theater psychopaths,
Yeah.
with law degrees.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah. I mean, it's like that corny Harry Potter quote, though. It's like whoever wants to be a leader probably shouldn't be a leader.
Yeah,
Right.
it's they're usually the biggest asshole in the room, and the guy you want to be running things is that that quiet guy that knows his shit,
Yeah.
and he doesn't, he's got shit that he wants to do. He doesn't necessarily want
He
to
doesn't
babysit
wanna be
people.
he doesn't want you
Hmm.
know what? It's the guy who, like, I'm okay with having a ton of guns, is the guy who doesn't give a shit if I have a ton of guns. It's when someone's like, "You shouldn't have those," that I'm like, "When you tell me I shouldn't have one, it makes me wanna have one. When you tell me I should."
I want more for my
Yeah,
friends, because now I feel like yeah.
it's like before this, I was indifferent to locking my door, but when you came by and said, "Stop locking your door, fascist," now I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna lock my door, and I'm gonna put a couch in front of it, you fucking weirdo." It's right? So it's like, it's those that wanna be in charge, but that's not really a discussion, that's just a kind of a weird talking point to hammer into the ground. But, yeah, it almost seems like whoever I kinda think whoever is in charge doesn't even know they're in, because they're like, the whole thing is this weird shell game, and it's all shadows and fog and mirrors, and it's like, once you are in charge, like, you don't, right? Because in, like, a nuclear war, right? Well, let's say we went around and we were trying to take out the last Russian submarine. At a certain point, it's like you get 4 pigs, or you get 3 pigs, and you label them 1, 2, and 4, and then you let them go. Everyone's gonna keep looking for the 3rd, and it doesn't exist. If you're looking for that last Russian submarine, they might all be gone, but you're still scouring the Marianas Trench and it's not there, right? So is that the case, right? So like Hitman, I walk around on Hitman, I just
it's
kill everybody on the map.
it's even worse than that now, actually, because what the Chinese are doing now, they're building essentially the same kind of micro reactors you put in a submarine. They're essentially building nuclear underwater drones, and their idea is they'll just drop them off and leave them there, and when the time's right, activate them and send them out, to go do something. And so luckily they are unmanned. So if the U.S. Navy decides, hey, this is a piece of dangerous debris, they'll just, they'll blow it up. But that's going to be the new game in the South China Sea, is essentially you're going to have unmanned nuclear drones going through the water there. And that's going to be one of the cat and mouse games. And the goal of that's going to be like, hey, if we can tie up all the resources chasing this, and then we're slipping Cub K style, covert systems out the back and staging them in the Caribbean, sleight of hand.
Fuck. So let's go back to that energy power, right? Because that's Stephen Greer's argument, and whatever people think of Stephen Greer, he does have a good argument, and it's logically why we're not even going to do UFOs this episode, but like, why would you keep them secret? And it's not because people can't handle it; it's because you want to keep the world is on the petrodollar. You want to keep them all. You want to grab them by the balls, because once you lose that,
Yeah.
you lose your vice grip of power. So what if the reason why we're in the Middle East is because we're keeping everything above fossil fuels classified, and what we're trying to do is run out the clock on fossil fuels to where China goes, we need to go get more, and where do they look to? The biggest well, where have we been since fall 2001?
Mm-hmm.
The Middle East, and we're
Well,
like, oh, were you looking for this?
that has been the game. That is precisely the strategy that's going on. And the big issue with that is, you know, every now and then everyone gets together to talk about disclosure, and then it comes down to, well, we can't do that. Guess what? We got fracking now. We got natural gas now. Let's keep running
Mhm.
the clock out. And that's the biggest issue we have, is because if we decentralized our power grid, if we cracked open the DOE black energy piggy bank, and we started
Yeah.
creating decentralized power grids all over, well, guess what? The game's over. We don't need that same system. So while I don't agree with Greer on everything, and that's stuff, getting into the UFO side of the argument, we don't even need to go into the
Yeah.
woo woo to explain. If you're thinking about this from a game theory adversarial zero sum game, you're either have monopoly over energy, and through energy you have monopoly on travel, or you don't.
Hmm.
Well, option is you don't want the don't. You want
Hmm.
to have that
Right.
control. And so that's why they do not, as their worst nightmare is losing control of that hegemony over the energy sector. And by means of that, you'll also have air transport. There's only so many airlines out there, and you can track pretty much what they're doing very easily.
Yeah, there's only so many airlines, so many ships. You can pretty much track. You're right. You can track, right? It's kind of like, COVID. It's kind of COVID's made the surveillance state so much easier because now you don't have these un uh, undocumented variables. What about Tommy and David going for a walk in the woods and we're just shooting the shit? Maybe we really are just talking about women. Maybe we're talking about overthrowing the government, but they can't have that when that's a system that they can't monitor. Versus now, if you go outside, you're killing my grandma, you stupid Nazi fascist. So stay inside. By the way, you can only communicate on a handful of platforms, all of which are monitored,
Mhm.
all of which are controlled. So yeah, keep everyone only using planes and boats for freight. And man, you can control the not only that, they can only go to there's one outlet in the world that you have to plug your metaphorical phone into, and it's the Middle East, and it's like the Middle East and the Arctic, and you know what? We've got our and where do we, and that's where we have our military is right there. So I mean, fuck, it's an evil plan, but it's a genius plan.
Yeah, Matt Bracken talked about this on, I think the channel is called The Modern Survivalist, but they were essentially talking about the motivation, which is if you're in Soviet Russia and you know that America, the shining city on the hill, is out there, well, you're motivated to go there. That's why they want to destroy the Constitution so much, is because they know as long as that exists, people are going to try to flee that system to get there. And as long as you have a little crop duster or a sailboat, guess what? You can
You
get
can
there.
go.
You can go. You can fly low on that thing. You can get out of there. And that is their worst fear, is if they lose control over the air industry, if they lose control over the shipping industry, if some dude can build some self-powered freaking quadcopter drone with a seat on it, guess what? You're out, you're
You
out
can
of there.
you can go over
And
the Berlin Wall. Yeah.
yeah, you're over the Berlin Wall, and you can be debriefed and tell everybody that, hey, here's what's going on in Tyranny Land, and please tell me you guys have a plan for what we're going to do about it, because I still have family back there or something like
Yeah.
that.
Fuck. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, I gotta piss. If you need to pee, take a bathroom break.
If you can cut it, yeah. If you
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
chop
yeah.
it up, well,
I'm
let's.
just gonna edit this out.
Yeah, good, because I froze up a few times anyway. So yeah, let's take a
Okay.
break
Yep.
real quick, and we'll be right back at it.
And where is that? 140. Make a note of that. Whew. This podcast brought to you by water. It's what the plants crave. Man,
And we're back.
I'm gonna have the weirdest. Just like once my suspension's over. I mean, the last episode uploaded was 272. I'm already
Right? There's just going to be this massive backlog, and
I'm just gonna rain down episodes, but yeah, that's one thing I've always been fascinated on are these sort of like these like trump cards where it's not like who has the best bomber or whatever. It's like these weird, they're not even, it's not technologies. What they are, like you said, game theories. It's about keeping energy classified so that you can only use this existing system. Like it's a lot easier, right? It's why why you can pit Parler and Twitter against each other and it doesn't matter as long as you're in control of AWS, right?
Yeah. One of the best things I could recommend anyone do to, if you want to get into foreign policy and you want to understand what's going on, there's something called the Great Courses Plus. It's basically like Netflix for college courses. And there is a course on there about game theory by, I believe his name is Scott Stevens. This guy is a literal real life wizard. He'll, teach you how this thing goes into everything from business deals to nuclear deterrence theory. And I remember this course was before the whole Epstein thing even happened. And he just, my jaw about dropped, but he just straight up says during the course, hey, sometimes the best way to get promoted is just walk in and give your boss blackmail material. Here you go. Now you can control me. Now I can be trusted, and you're moving up in the system. And he just straight up said that. My jaw just about dropped. I'm like, he's not wrong.
I mean, you're not wrong.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, I thought you meant give blackmail material on your boss. No, you say give it on yourself. Hey, here's me cheating on my wife. You've given him the gun. You've given him the gun.
Exactly. It's like I would love to send, dick pics to Patrick Ho, or as Hunter Biden would say, China's motherfucking spy chief.
Yeah.
And get a $50,000 a month, energy gig in the Ukraine or whatever.
Two ways a cat.
Like I would love that gig. Hey, I'd trade some dirty pics for that.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's got it almost seems that's kind of like a real life sell your soul to the devil thing, right?
It is. Like, it's that term didn't come from nowhere.
Yeah, but man, like if there isn't a part of me that's like, there's like a deep internal part of me that's just like despises that. Like I'd rather have to claw myself up the podcast empire.
Yeah, it is the lowest form of cowardice and the scum available. And unfortunately, that blackmail is the glue that holds everything together. And it's the only concrete way you can know, hey, I can trust this guy because if he goes,
if you go in with blackmail, I mean that's modern day. I was just taking orders. That's modern day. I was just telling them I just drove the trains.
And you look at what's going on, in our foreign policy establishment and everything. That's essentially what it is. You see all these. I actually would go as far as to say they're grooming autistic people in a lot of these think tanks. You see, some of them that actually know what's going on, and some of these people are just the most awkward guys you've ever met in your life. And they can argue academic nomenclature all day, but they don't understand the difference between, they use the term state capitalism all the time, but they'll never say communism when they're talking about China. It's like, they're playing these weird, games where essentially you're taking the next generation, you're controlling all the language they see and they hear, and you're like removing the concept of like, hey, this is a communist country, even though it's called the CCP. What they're doing is state capitalism. And it's like, I remember, I forget if it was Brookings Institution or one of the nerd think tanks. And I heard one of them even say, there's also a party element to this state capitalism. Like, do you even understand what the hell you just said? Like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, wait a second, hold up. They're like
the Chinese.
Like, what do you think we're talking about when we say state? And it's communism.
It's fucking what I listened to one of his archived episodes. Man, I just feel bad for you. It looks like the sun is just.
It's all right actually. I'm just leaning a little bit forward.
Okay, that's a personal like. I hate that shit for me. So when I see someone else with sun, I don't mean like I hate that. I'm like I feel bad for you. But if you don't care, hey, more power to you. But yeah, I was listening to Tim Dillon archives, and he was talking to like Ray Kump. I don't know when this episode's from, but. Tim Dillon's like, man, and it's like, I'm not like advocating for some like, communist China, and Ray Kump, he's got a lisp, and he's like, I mean, they're not really a communist. And he goes, Raymond, what does the CCP stand for? He's like, the Chinese Communist Party. And he's like, enough of that, Raymond. Thank you.
No. It's the state capitalism party.
It's the state capitalism organization.
With party characteristics, socialism with Chinese characteristics.
It's a weird thing where you can controlling the language, but I can't help but think that there's always going to be like a wild card in the system, right? Like no one, there's some beautiful irony that like the creation of the internet was to keep communication lines between nuclear bunkers for the elite after the world had been turned into a radioactive ash heap. There's something beautiful that that was like the last piece in their puzzle. They put together the nuclear triad. They've got the bunkers. Now we just got to set up the communication lines and then we're good. And that communication lines roared into this monster that just disseminated information in their worst possible nightmare. I can't help but think there's going to be another something like that. I don't know what it could possibly be.
So that's why I say God bless James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, because when there's wild cards out there and they can go to Veritas Tips at Proton Mail and talk to someone like James O'Keefe and they can blow that up. That's the deterrence factor that we need. If we have those wild cards that have the balls to stand up when they're in their position and put pressure on the people that need to have pressure put on them, it's that fear of, hey,
yes.
The enemy, they want to turn 1 in 3 into a government informant, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That's the old school communist method.
Yeah.
Our goal needs to turn 2 out of 3 into investigative journalists and whistleblowers.
Yeah.
That's and once we start doing that, and you see James O'Keefe, I know when he was on like Tim Pool's show and whatnot, you hear him say this, it's about they want to create that atmosphere of fear in us where we're afraid of what we're going to say and how that's going to be blowing back on us. Well, we need to create that same thing where they're sitting there thinking, hey, if I ban this dude, if I do this incredibly immoral thing, is he talking to Project Veritas?
That's what I keep saying,
that dude looking
man.
over? And that's how we get out of this. That is
you gotta be, it's Project Veritas. And the reason why they hate Project Veritas is because all it is a video of the person. It's not, hey, I heard that this was.
He's not putting opinions in, and a cute alpaca. Don't forget the cute alpaca.
Yeah, the retracto, the alpaca. Yeah, right. It's retracto. But like, yeah, that's the thing that like my liberal friends' heads, they're always torn apart. Well, James O'Keefe, he's known to, and I'm like, what did the video show at timestamp 1 minute 53 seconds? Just what did it show? I'm like, I don't want anything else. What did it showed? This person saying that we want to put Trump supporters in re-education camps. And I'm like,
yeah, he's not giving his opinion.
I'm like, there it is. There's the statement. I think Project Veritas could even be more lethal if they did 0 graphics, 0 editing, and they just released raw video. But it's not a sexy, it's not a soundbite.
And some of it's just scratchy, messed up stuff. I mean, you're wearing a hidden microphone. There's all kinds of just crap that you don't need. But we saw him do that kind of when they were putting out the full CNN calls that they were in on. When that's an available option, they did do that. And by the way, when he called into the CNN meeting, that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my. Yeah, that was true, brilliant James O'Keefe fashion right there.
They need to get a fucking NSA informant. That's what they need.
God hope that they already have one or some of them, because we need somebody that is starting to go after the handlers rather than constantly. If there's one thing that and this is just the 40K nerd and the Counter-Strike player in me, and I'm sure you're the guys you talk to, you hear the same thing from them all the time. I don't like being reactive. I like being proactive. I like setting. One of my favorite Don the Pleb episodes, he was just recently talking about tempo. If they want to set if they want to come at us with a uncomfortable set of terms, looking to make our lives uncomfortable, let's lean into that and let's accelerate the tempo to something that we know that they can't keep up with.
Your terms are acceptable. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Your terms are acceptable. Let's see who's better at the game.
Yeah, it's let's turn it up a notch. It's like, you really want to dance? It's kind of like, I think it was oh fuck, what's his name? I had him on my podcast. It's Sam. Oh fuck, he's got the intelligence. He's a former intel. Fuck, I've had him on several times. Sorry, now I'm just having like a stroke. I gotta find this out, or it's gonna destroy my brain.
That's good for me, because if I haven't seen it already, I'll definitely want to go back and watch that.
Yeah, it's Culper, Culper. Okay. Yeah, I had him on with Ted I and Don and Dale, and it was one of those.
Is he with Forward Observer? Is that his?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've seen him.
Yeah, I remember him saying he was like the left views violence as a dial and the right views it as a light switch. And maybe that's what we need, is to just hey, YouTube, don't fucking ban me. I'm not calling for violence. They've taken down episodes saying I'm calling for violence. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just
but to say it's going to happen is not the same as saying we need to go do it. And that's
Yeah.
the biggest, the biggest issue here is that if our state security services, if the people that are supposed to be doing counterintelligence and supposed to be holding traitors to account don't do it, and people lose respect for the legitimacy of our state security forces, well, we're going to see, if you studied Colombia, we're going to see Los Pepes come to America real quick. And you're going to see pyres full of tires, and everyone's going to be wishing that the lawyers grew a pair of balls and charged someone with treason.
Yeah.
Because, I know nobody wants to say, oh, yeah, we're going to have to, the penalty for treason is death. And, that's a terrible
You don't want
tragedy.
to set a
But,
precedent.
but guess what? If you have two generations of kids that grow up seeing that no one gets held to account, no one has to answer for one of the highest crimes you can really commit, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? We need two generations that are raised up seeing the penalty for treason so that they know not to do that.
I was talking to one of the guys I've had on from the Special Activities Division, and that's what he was saying. And he was like, I mean, yeah, you say it in 2021, you're like, the penalty for treason is death. And people are like, aren't we a little more civilized than that? And hey, I do understand that argument. Like, aren't we above that?
Yeah, it goes right into deterrence theory.
It does. But at the same time, it's like, man, like when you have I can't touch this because I want to put this episode on YouTube, so I can't touch this. When you have debatable debacles perhaps occurring around November 3rd and nothing happens,
and every court, every check and balance just says, pass the buck, we don't have to deal with this. Well, guess what? Now you have over 70 million Americans who are totally fed up with the system, who have been watching all of these GS 15 plus pay grade guys just get away with murder essentially. And guess what? We're seeing rising crime. We're seeing rising suicide statistics. We're seeing people just say, fuck it, the whole system's broke. And, 2 generations from now, it's going to be gangland Juarez because, guess what? Violence is the supreme authority that all other authority derives from. And if you have young punks growing up that don't learn to respect who the big chief is, well, they're going to try to become the big chief and the tribal leader. And guess what? That means you're going and you're finding the family of whoever your near peer competitor is, and you're sticking them in a pyre of tires.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to come down to if our institutions, don't stop worrying about protecting the institution and start worrying about protecting the Constitution. That's the biggest problem right now, is that our entire GS 15 plus, senior executive class, their loyalty is to institutions, not the Constitution.
Yeah. If you grow up talking back to your mom and your dad never puts you in place, all of a sudden you're away at college or something and you're going to start talking back to some bouncer and you're going to get laid the fuck out. Or worse, you're going to be talking back to someone later in life and you're going to get a knife between your ribs and you're going to bleed out on the street in Panama City. And it's because you never learned to shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
when it's due to shut up. That doesn't mean be a pussy with no spine. But what one of these special activity divisions guys said is, they're like, the only language anyone understands is violence. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he goes, when you're over there and you're detaining some guys, he goes, if they talk back to you, like we have what our rule is if they talk back to you, tell them no one speak. And if anyone speaks, you break their jaw. And I was like, Jesus, that dials up. And he goes, if they spit at you or push back, I go, what? And he goes, you decapitate them. Because it's two. There's 2 switches. You speak, you get your jaw broken, and if you speak back or talk up after that, you get your head chopped off in front of your friends. And he goes, you know what? Oh, we lost David again. Fucking internet. Sorry about that, everybody. Oh, I don't think it's me. I think it's his internet. Normally takes like 10, 20 seconds for him to come back. But yeah, that's what one of the guys that's been on this podcast from the Special Activities Division said. You speak, you get your jaw broken, you speak back or spit or anything, you get your head sawed off. David should be coming back any second now. David should be coming back. He's not coming back yet. And
we're back.
There he is. Yeah. It's but yeah, they're saying, that's the only thing that people understand. And it's a brutal truth. But I mean, it's like, dude, it's like what led Hitler to suicide? And it wasn't like we should stop. It was Soviet rain, right? It was the rain being artillery. What led Hirohito to giving up? It wasn't, okay, these Americans make a good point. No, it was the land of the rising sun having a second rising sun.
The supreme authority
on the
which
6th
is always violence.
It's I mean, it's a brutal thing, but I mean, look, and when we say that, that doesn't mean that that's like what you and I want. Like, I
Yeah,
don't,
no, but if we're in a foreign country, like the mindset of that is incredibly important, because if you're in somewhere where Islamo-fascists are the ruling party, and they're expecting violence, and you don't give them violence, well, then they think you're a bitch, and they're going to try to take advantage of you. Same thing. If you go to South America and you're not capable of going to 11 the way they are, well, then I'm going to take advantage of this gringo because he's soft. And that might be extreme when we're talking about what we're doing inside the continental United States, but you scale that down, it's the same thing. If you have 3 dozen people that are basically committing treason and nothing happens to any of them, guess what? You're about to have 60 people committing treason, because it turns out that's a very profitable business.
mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, if you don't have the supreme authority, the same way gold is supposed to back currency, or hard assets supposed to back a fiat currency, if you don't have the capability to enforce the order that you're giving with violence, well, then all you're doing by giving an order is challenging and putting a little line in the sand and saying, hey, don't cross that line.
Yeah.
And if that person thinks you're a bitch, they're coming across that line.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right? It's like when we went in to have the Japanese sign the treaty, we didn't go in there like, all right, it's over. We went in there with battleships pointing all of their guns at the city. It was
Mm-hmm.
understood, if you don't sign this today, we're going to demolish this place. We're going to light it on fire. It's it's an unfortunate truth, but it's what reality. Look, it's an unfortunate truth that gravity exists. It's an unfortunate truth that the oxidative stress of breathing eventually will kill you after 100
It's
years.
the
Look,
tragedy of great power politics, which is why I
yeah,
really hope you get John Mearsheimer on,
I
because
know.
he wrote the literal book on that.
He hasn't emailed me back yet. I think he's playing hard to get.
He
He's
might be,
he's playing power politics on me. It's but I think I'll get him, man. Enough people. If I don't get him, what I do is I wait a little bit, and then I keep building up the podcast, get more episodes, I get
yeah,
bigger guests, because now there's this sort of like legitimacy I can have when it's like I'm like, look who I've had on, look how many authors I've had on, and
yeah.
it's they start to go, oh, okay. So there's this whole like power. There's this whole like I'm learning there's this whole like game theory and tactic of the podcast itself.
Oh yeah. And one guy to study on that, and he gets into a lot of the woo woo, but he also gets into a lot of good stuff, is Greg Carlwood at the
Oh
higher
yeah,
side. Yeah.
THC.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
THC. I love THC. And
I love Greg
when I
Carlwood.
first discovered it, I'm looking through his backlog, and I'm seeing all these high profile names, and I'm seeing
Yeah.
all these people he's had on there. And I'm like, holy crap, how have I not found this guy before? And really, I haven't had that same reaction since, I found your channel through Don the Pleb. And I'm just
Oh, thanks,
looking
man.
through all the people you've had. And I'm just like, dude, this guy's going to blow up.
Yeah, it's
Because like you've already, you've got the library already there.
I appreciate it, man. It's that's I thank you for I enjoy hearing that. But yeah, Greg Carlwood, right? It's because when you go through his, you're like, why the fuck? Why isn't there more of this? How come you
Yeah.
don't hear more of it? And at a certain point, I stopped complaining. Why don't more people hear of Greg Carlwood? And I just enjoy it. I
Yeah.
just stop bitching about how come no one's ever heard of this burger joint. Just enjoy the burger,
Yeah.
and they'll get their money. That's kind of how I feel. Like kind of how I visualize this is like I know it's being suppressed. I know I can't get out there, but the way I look at it is I think the internet is one big forest, and I think every episode I do is 1 gallon of gasoline that I'm just dumping. Whether they let the spark hit it after episode 2 with 2 gallons, or whether they're waiting for episode 380, to me, I'm like, it's just going to blow up that much more.
Well, so that's why I would almost encourage, and this is more getting into, if I were in your position, I'd be encouraging, like, you remember the dog whistle of, oh, this is the forbidden hand gesture, right? Well, I'm a former dive master, so this is very important to me for a lot of reasons other than that. But when you can create all of these dog whistles, and you can get them to ban all the bigger mainstream legitimate stuff, and it forces people to go to other platforms, and all of a sudden they come across, you're already pre-set up there, and someone looks through your library, like you've got the kindling and the gasoline poured everywhere, and you just, all you got to do is just wait for them to accelerate that censorship, and it plays right into your hand.
That's how I'm trying to go right now.
I remember back in when all the Boogaloo memes were coming out and whatnot. I was in a lot of the same
the boog.
yeah, I was in a lot of the same Facebook groups. Sam Culper was in some of these groups, and Duncan Lemp was in one of these groups. I don't know if you're familiar with the Duncan Lemp case. Don did a good podcast on this, but when we knew we were all getting banned on Facebook and whatnot, we were debating what platforms to go through. And I suggested Telegram at the time, and everyone was like, "LOL, Telegram is fake and gay, and all that stuff. We're not going to Telegram." And Duncan Lemp was like, "You know what? I'll set up like a server and a forum and everything, and we'll use that." And I was like, "All right, well, I'll sign up to help you test that out," and did sign up all that. And next thing you know, the next thing I heard about Duncan Lemp was Montgomery County PD out in Maryland kicked in his door and shot him in his bed, essentially. And they didn't release the body cam. Don has a stream covering where he went into all that. Yeah, it was an incredibly fucked up case. And unfortunately, now everyone's on Telegram though, so I did win that argument, not in the way I wanted to, but everyone's there. But back to the point I was trying to make out of this is like, when I see censorship happening on the mainstream platforms, I love it, because I'm sitting here waiting on Telegram. I'm waiting for all the boomers to get driven into the little circles that we're setting up so I can give them the real stuff that we can't talk about on YouTube. So every time they do the censorship campaign and everything, well, guess what? You're playing into the austere religious scholars' hands right there.
But that is true though. That's how I kind of look at it. I'm like, man, because I was I'm friends with this fucking brilliant girl, and so it's after I got banned from YouTube for a week. The first thing I did was I made like a 30-second video where I was just kind of like, fuck this, and then I stitched together the three. So they banned episode 289, saying it was hate speech, and then like a month or two later they banned episode 291, saying it was hate speech, and then finally they banned episode 370 and said there's a strike against community guidelines for perpetuating misinformation, alleging that glitches and widespread fraud changed the outcome of the 2020 election, which I was unaware is actually hate speech. I didn't know that I was actually raping them by saying that. That was new to me, as I learned.
Literally, I mean,
I thought I was just talking about an election.
You might as well went in dry and put a Club K missile to the back of their head,
and that's what they said. Is they're like, I was like, I thought I was just talking, and they said no, and they showed me videos of me actually raping them to death, and I was like, I don't even remember doing that. So I was like, hey, call a spade, but that's what it is. But so I was like, so I stitched all three of those videos together, made like one 6-hour episode, prefaced it with like a fuck all of you. And I was basically going to kind of go like Allahu Akbar. As soon as my suspension was up, I was just going to upload
one Allah, we're going against the great Satan.
Yeah. And I was just, that's what I was going to go in, and they were going to ban me for 2 weeks. I knew as soon as I put it up, I'd get banned for 2 weeks. And then if I came back and did it a third time, they'd ban me. So I was just going in and pulling the pin. Right. But then I was talking to this girl, and she was like, that's retarded. She's like, that's no different than just like virtue signaling to conservatives. She's like, you're not getting anything done by doing that. She was like, stay in their system, go behind enemy lines, and then just put up episode 370, 371, 373 and go, the most previous episodes on Rumble and BitChute, I'm not allowed to put it on YouTube because it's full of hateful and dangerous content. Well, what do people do? You go, huh? It's like when you're a kid and your parents are like, don't play Grand Theft Auto or listen to Eminem. I'm like, I didn't know what either of those were, but those sound like a great time. So let's play San Andreas.
That goes back to the when because I used to be a metalhead and a nerd and everything into that. But you go back and you look at when all the heavy metal and the hair metal bands had to get they had to put the parental advisory label on all their albums, and people thought that there was going to be a fight over that, and they were like, nah, slap it on there. That's going to make the kids love it.
That was a sign that just said Club Cool.
Yeah, and so like the smartest thing you could do, like if you have like the episode with Claire that gets banned for talking about the forbidden subject, well, the smartest thing you could do is cut a little teaser out that doesn't violate any of the terms of service and be like, hey, guess what? I've got this former CIA person. We're going to be talking about all kinds of cool stuff that we can't talk about here, but you can join us over on Rumble. And we're going to the danger zone. Yeah. And right? Guess what? That right there, you've just created a bridge to get those people onto those alternative platforms. They're going to want to see that kind of stuff anyway. And you're maintaining your position on their platform. So that's a smart way to do it.
That's what I've decided to do, is not going to go down in a blaze of glory. What I'll do is I'll build my skyscraper in East Berlin, and I'll just start building bridges to West Berlin, and eventually they'll take it down. Eventually, like that is the end game.
But then you have Casus Belli. They made the first move.
yeah, right. So eventually what I'm going to do is just try to filter as many people over as I can. I was also thinking about putting up the forbidden episodes on YouTube, not re-uploading because that will get me a quick ban. But in the future, let's say I have Claire on again and we talk about the forbidden forbidden, Jesus Christ in heaven, forbidden subject that can't be named, right? It's the U.S. Tiananmen Square. What I'll do is I was thinking about, why not just upload those episodes when they go up, but I'll go into whenever we talk about that, and I'll just bleep it out, and I'll just put like
Just have like a Rumble and a BitChute logo. Like
no,
if you were
no. What I'll do is I'll put YouTube's message, and I'll be like, YouTube has decided that this is hateful content, and I'll just use their words, and I'll be like, for your protection, we will not be airing this on. It'll just be my voice. I'll be like, if you're hearing this message, it's because this section of the podcast has been bleeped out for your protection. If you're curious, you can go to BitChute and Rumble, and then just have the episode just cut back in, and all of a sudden be like, yeah, and then we'll just start talking about the next topic, but I'll just be beep, beep.
yeah. That's the genius way to do it.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're once you do that, you are facilitating the bridge that gets everyone to the next platform.
Or do I go even more covert, and do I just not even address it? Do I just upload episodes, and every once in a while you just notice, hey, you skipped one?
Hey, I see no reason not to stick the tongue in the cheek as far as you can get it there. You twist their own words and policy against them whenever you can.
I'll just maybe I'll just upload the episode, but what it will just be like a censorship warning from YouTube. It'll just be a screen recording of that, and it'll be like episode 370 with Miss Claire Lopez, and then it'll just say like,
even if it's a teaser, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. 3 seconds of the person, please introduce yourself, and then I'll just have it cut off. And
just have all the alternative media logos pop up, and then links are in the description.
Yeah, I'll just be like, please do not. That's what I say. I'm like, please don't check out this episode on Rumble, guys. I'm like, do not do that. I'm like, just don't fucking do it. It's you watch it, and within 3 seconds you'll be doing the sig how. It's
the best way to do it. Reverse psychology, man. Don't go over there.
Yeah,
you don't want to know about the dangerous stuff. You don't
want to know about it. Is it addictive? It's not addictive. You don't want to know about it. Do you get
the first one on Rumble's free. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's don't go there. My friend went there once, never came back. What's over there? I'm not going to tell you. It's over there. Here's the link. Don't do it. Don't fucking do it, guys. Man, maybe that's what I should do. Make a Rumble account and get a free hoodie or something. I can't afford that. But just something like that. Or, I don't know, maybe just play the episode in the background muted while I'm talking to someone else. I don't know.
It's probably a bit too much effort. Unless you're really trying to signal to someone, and you're trying to, get shady. But there's nothing wrong with like what you're saying of just cutting in between and having the message, or at the very least just having a teaser going. Guess what? This episode exists, but you can't watch it here.
Okay,
and that's all you need.
That might be what I need to do. I'm having a stroke apparently, but like, I think that's the move, is to just do, please introduce, the first 10 seconds of just bullshit banter, and then I'll just cut it. It'll almost be like Rogan, how they still upload Jerry clips. You'll hear Rogan's voice. You can find this in every other episode on Spotify.
And that's kind of genius of what he's doing, though. I wouldn't have gone with Spotify for that, but it works.
I'll take that 100 million. I'll take that 100
million.
Yeah.
Hey, you can, if you can show people this is what you have, and then giving them the means to go over there and the incentive to do it, that's you're effectively dismantling the hegemony of the cathedral
without actively doing anything. Just being like, I'm not allowed to post this episode here, so go to Rumble and BitChute. Like, that's just their words. I'm not telling you can't go.
Yeah. Now the best thing you can use is their words.
Yeah. Now, ultimately, I will be axed. I don't know how it will happen, but eventually I will be axed. Like, that's not if, that's when.
Yeah.
I wonder if it will be, because what I didn't know this is so, as long as I didn't know this, so like if you get a second strike, I'll be banned for 2 weeks, and then if I get a third strike within 90 days of the first strike, I'll be permabanned. What I didn't know is if you go 90 days without a second strike, your first strike gets removed. So, but even then, I find myself, I'm like, oh, so if I just play by the rules, and I'm like, wait, no, I'm not doing this. I'm like, why am I playing by like, hey, if you just turn in one fellow Jew, you can get bread. And I'm like, well, that's
right.
I'm like, that's a good deal. And then it's like, wait,
don't you want the Soros deal?
I'm like, just get off the fucking train. I'm like, why am I even getting on the train? I'm like, well, you know what? That is a big piece of bread. And it's like, just leave. It's going to Dachau. I don't want to go there. Like,
That's why, you take that piece of bread, you break it into breadcrumbs, and that breadcrumb trail leads to Rumble or BitChute or, whatever your primary alternative platform is going to be that you want to lead people to.
Yeah.
And that's really the solution to how we, get around this problem is eventually, all the interesting stuff is going to be over there. And, who wants to watch James Charles men's makeup
Yeah,
videos? Like,
I,
who are those people?
God, it's such a, you can tell it just so, you can tell everything in the, maybe what I'll do is do a teaser and then it will cut off and it will just be like a 10-second silent recording of Tiananmen Square.
I actually on my desktop, I maintain a little notepad file that has all the Tiananmen Square copy paste just ready to go, just in case.
Good. Good.
Oh, if you have a computer and you don't have that ready to go,
You're not doing it right.
Follow China Uncensored, follow China Unscripted, follow guys like Spalding, and make sure that you have the ammunition needed to nuke the Wu Maos from orbit with.
But you're right. It's, man, I would love to fucking get some like insider videos of like the Uyghur concentration camps, but whatever.
Well, Disney might have some, the extended uncut, version of Mulan that has them in the background. I really, my big thing is like I want to get access to like, apparently they have these vans where they can do the organ extraction surgery on the way to the airport. And it's like, I'm looking at all these like senior executive guys that get paid like six figures to, to write up failure policy. And I'm like, what we could do to get this country out of the red and back into the black? What if we salvaged them for parts? Like, like if we can't get them to reform, like what,
hey, scrap metal.
Scrap them.
Just scrap.
Let's scrap them,
Mr. Kerrigan.
Let's liquidate some human resources. Yeah. I'm sorry, human resource liabilities.
Liabilities. Mr. Kerrigan, your episode's been taken down for promoting the human trafficking. I was like, what? It was not. It was. I was.
Listen. If they do that, I will claim that. Listen, I am an advocate for the Chinese Communist Party and state capitalism, and you're racist against the Chinese if you think that their measure for stability, you're incredibly racist if you want to interfere in the internal affairs of China maintaining stability. Like, why would you want to do that?
Do you think, real talk, do you think I should get a Chinese flag instead and see if they'll, because everyone that pays attention to the show knows what I'm about and they know who I'm for.
Would
they take it down?
If you're having a China centric episode or something like that, or if you're getting really spicy, why not just throw it up there, for an episode here or two? And
God, I wish I was black. I wish I was a black man transitioning to a black woman
in a wheelchair. Like if you had the
wheelchair
too,
with a hijab
like
and the CCP.
Untouchable. Like, like they would just like you'd go right beyond GS-15 and right into the ES pay grades. You'd be at the top of the foreign policy establishment. I'm just sitting here with Greta Thunberg next to me. We have a whole display of like soy products, and it's just, they wouldn't be able to touch me with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. I mean, that's the absurdity of the system that they're trying to run on us. And so that's why I say, like, the best thing you could do is use your enemy's momentum, their words, their policy, everything that they have. You just accelerate. Yeah, you accelerate that tempo to 11, and you catch them in the hyperextension. Let them overextend.
They want to start a fire. Well, let's start siphoning gas.
Part of it, we're actually, in a lot of ways, we're very similar to the situation between Japan and the U.S. right now, because what caused them, I mean, they knew Pearl Harbor and taking us on was a long shot, but also we shut off their gas, and put them, we shut off that gas and we put them in a situation where it's like either we push this empire back and pull back, or we go on the offensive. Well, we saw Gimki Fuji's advertisement at the CPAC, which was far better than just about any of the speakers and stuff that they had there, minus like James O'Keefe and former president. But Samurai Alliance, man, that dude kind of knows what's going on. And of course, they're not going to, go backwards. They're going to go forward, and they're going to take the hit at us. But you look at what they're doing to our energy grid. They're trying to put us on green energy. They're trying to, say, hey, nukes aren't safe. Hey, you can't do this, that, and the other thing. Meanwhile, they're building a string of pearls with nuclear reactors, fracking, natural gas. So, we just have to accept that, what we're doing here is we're dealing with people that they're operating. Warfare. Yeah, it's unrestricted warfare. They're operating under post-truth politics, and they believe that they are fully allowed to lie to the infidel. It's all taikia for them.
Yeah, they do believe it. You can lie about anything. It doesn't matter. But I do like to think that maybe somehow Biden's red pilling liberals.
Well, he's definitely doing that. I mean, you're seeing
He's
so much buyers from what was that? Naomi Wolf or Naomi something like that. That
yeah.
liberal doctor, whatever who went on Tucker. Um, and you know, you're seeing that right now. And I just love to to mock all the Bernie bros, like just be like, hey, is this what you wanted? Like, is this really what you wanted? Because this is what you got now.
You know what's going to be the red pill is when left-leaning people start coming out and saying, "What the fuck? Why are we bombing Syria? How come we didn't get our student debt uh fucking forgiven? How come we didn't? How come we didn't get stimulus checks?" And then when they get banned for hate speech,
Well, that, to an extent, that's already happening, and actually,
it
so a
is.
lot. The problem with the communists is that so many of them are actually flipping over to like, hey, you know what? Let's keep bombing the Middle East because these Kurds might give us a communist utopia over there that we can run out of. Yeah, I mean, we laugh, but the hardest Antifa has to offer, that's how they think, is that like, well, if you're going to go to a training camp and do that kind of stuff, well, you have the Kurds, they're kind of already commie sympathetic, and so they're kind of coming, they're coming around to this whole let's bomb the Middle East thing. Never thought that would happen. I mean, they're still incredibly. You'd think that for how anti-Israel they are, they would get nuked, but they don't.
Man,
Um,
it's the most fucking insane. I also like the red pill of their whole dictator Trump narrative. You can't vote
the
out a
worst
dictator.
dictator I've ever seen
You
in my
can't.
life.
You
God, I
can't.
wish he would have done some dictator thing.
You can't vote out a dictator. And man, what a Nazi! Who the fuck Who the fuck like recognizes Jerusalem or whatever the fuck he did? Move the embassy to Jerusalem.
Yeah, Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Yeah.
It's and it's just yeah. It kind of at a certain point, it's like whatever they ban, like is fire.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah,
whatever.
the old term over to target. When are you getting the
Get
most
flagged.
flack? You're over it.
Yeah, it's when an image is blurred on Instagram, it's of a big titty hoe in like yoga pants, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
a good
the
image.
it's and this should be basic bitch shit that they get. It's the Streisand effect.
Yeah,
There's no other way around it, and they just for them, it's you'd think they would be smart enough to go around that, and
and
because
allow it.
if you keep it in, the best way to deal with something, we all know where the term conspiracy theory originated from. The best thing to do if you want to shut something down
Let it
is not to
flourish.
shut it down. You should encourage it, and then you
Feed
should
it.
add bullshit on top of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, man, it's the reptilians. There's
yeah,
aliens, and
yeah.
conspiracy. You throw around all that kind of stuff, and that's how you discredit something. You
Mm-hmm.
discredit it by putting in, you go so overt that's covert. You make so much white noise that you can't figure out,
Mm-hmm.
what's actually going on there. And they fortunately, a lot of the the button pushers. I was going to say trigger pullers, but the band hammer button pushers, they're coming after us. They're so petty. They're so in this reactive rage mindset that they don't think about the Streisand effect. They don't think about how every time they
Just
ban someone, they're driving, people who are, they were normies yesterday, but they're about to come somewhere where a guy like me can try to radicalize them a little bit and try to, push them around the path. You're putting them in a position now where they're seeking out a location where I can speak freely and say whatever I want. I can talk about the senior executive service. I can talk about the forbidden subjects. I can talk about all that stuff on a place like Telegram
yeah,
or
yeah,
others. And if they nuke Telegram, we'll all be somewhere else.
yeah. It's again, it's yeah, it's the most what you would do if you were in their if I was in their position, I wouldn't ban a single thing. I'd let all the I'd let Plandemic, I'd let Absolute Proof, Michael and I'd let them all up. I
Yeah,
don't put labels on them. Don't put
I'd show up to their events either pissed drunk, actually drunk, or pretending to be pissed drunk, and I would just be yelling to most of I totally back this guy, and it's all the alien. Like I would be
yeah,
trying to make his followers look like a bunch of lunatics,
yeah.
and
That's
that's
what
what I would
you do.
try to be doing if I was trying to discredit these people, and
That's what you
they just
do. Yeah,
they don't know how to do that
I
anymore
would make
apparently.
make the stories trend. Be like the far right thinks that Biden is a Chinese communist agent. Instead of squashing everything,
Yeah,
is that like
ridicule and mock.
you know
Don't cover it up.
if your wife's cheating on you and or whatever, if your husband's cheating on you, whatever the fuck, if your gender fluid foxkin's cheating on you or you're cheating on your gender fluid foxkin, man, the last thing you do is they go for your phone and you go, you can't look at my phone. They go, can I see your laptop? You go, you can't look at my laptop. And it's like, Can I see
Yeah,
your
it's like,
iPad? You're like, no. And it's like, okay, well, why not? What you would do is be like, knock yourself out.
yeah, that as soon as something like that happens, like my, I'm a
Spidey sense.
I'm a Warhammer 40K nerd at heart. I like playing, I grew up with things like Dark Heresy. So for me, that's just like, congratulations, you've just put me in Lord Inquisitor mode. And now I'm like
Yeah.
doubly curious about
Yeah.
not only everything that's being covered up, but I want to know everything
All the
about your
other
life.
shit. I want to know all
Yeah.
the other shit. Now I'm interested in the other shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like now I just want to pull this thread until the pants come off.
Yeah. And you know what? They'll be smart. They'll be smart if they start covering up UFO conspiracies. That would be a smart move by them, because it would kind of be the same muddle the waters or
Yeah.
muddy the waters,
Once
right?
again, get people chasing after swamp
Mhm.
gas and weather balloons
Yeah,
rather than looking at.
if they're banning reptilians and they're also banning
Yeah,
pandemic,
yeah.
and it's all just fucking
Look at the swamp gas and the weather balloons. Look at the puppets in DC. Don't look at the
yeah.
policymakers over here.
But the
Yeah.
thing is they don't think strategically, because they truly are foaming at the mouth. Cover it up, cover it up, and it's like, you got to be cool. You got to be cool. But
So
yeah.
So there's a really cool. He does a lot of like stage magic pickpocket stuff, but his name is Apollo Robbins, if I remember correctly, and he's kind of like this ADHD dude, and he kind of got into security consulting because I believe it was he went up and like stole some stuff from like President Carter. I think he was former President Carter at this time, but he stole some stuff from President Carter and then basically gave it back. This dude could like steal the watch off your wrist. I've seen him pull the glass, like he'll like basically wave a little piece of cloth and then steal the glasses off of some guy's face without him even realizing it. And, he spends a lot of time, some of the, when he's not actually performing and doing, this live pickup, I almost said pickup, but pickpocket show thing, where he basically talks about, how the human brain works, how you can only put so much attention where, and how you can, manipulate that and sleight of hand stuff. And that dude's like, I mean, if you really want to see like the pinnacle of just, that sleight of hand stuff, and you understand that mentality, and you understand that there are people out there that practice that all day long, nonstop. When I was working in entertainment, where I'm from, Sarasota, it's a circus town. Circus families from all over came in there. And once again, they have their own kind of like Islamic taqiyya, but it's all comes from gypsy culture. It's the same kind of thing in theater. It's like there's the gobjo, there's the non-gypsies, they're the people that pay to watch the performance. They're not one of us. And so, you lie to them and you manipulate them and you see how much you can get away with. And that's why it's like, you look in entertainment, there's some of the most, you don't think about it because they're not looking to dominate your life and destroy you most of the time. But there are some of the most petty people that think about power games nonstop. They will constantly try to gyp you out of a $20 bill, not because they care about the $20 bill. They just want to see how much they can get away with. Like, can they, are you someone that can be moved? And like the way Apollo Robbins will talk about it is like, he'll go up and he'll shake somebody's hand. And one of the first things he'll do is he'll try to take a step with them as he's shaking their hand, just to see, hey, is this someone that will take a step with me? Will he move? Is he going to be rigid? How can I feel this guy out? And it's just, those high level head games. And when you think about the fact that the true elites, the guys that are really thinking about how to maneuver, how to handle assets, how to, have the useful idiot do what we need him to do without fucking it up and without realizing that he is the useful idiot. That's what, that's the kind of way these guys are thinking. And so Apollo Robbins, if you've never heard of him or looked up his stuff, really fascinating character. Of just, ADHD gone wild, essentially thinking about, shady stuff.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. I mean, I don't know whether or not. Do you think this episode will get banned from YouTube? Have we touched on the forbidden subjects too much?
I don't. The one regarding a recent election, I don't think so.
I don't think we went into that.
That being said, I did mention like Azov groups. I did
no.
mention
All that they only banned for a specific day that happened late last year, a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. David froze up. I don't think this episode will get banned. It takes about 30 seconds for his internet to pop back in. I don't think this episode will get banned because we didn't touch on the forbidden topic that we're not allowed to talk about. But I'm a little curious because now I kind of double take every time I upload something, which I know is their end game is to get you to self-censor and to question your motives and your actions and the things you say in the videos you upload. So I don't know whether or not this episode will get yanked. I don't think it will. Any second now, David should be popping back in. That was perfect timing. You back? I can't hear you. Can't hear you. He's gone dark on us. We can't hear him.
All
There we
right,
go.
Gary. I don't know
There
why
we
I
go.
muted that
No,
time.
you're
But
good. You're good.
I would say
I've gotten good at saying when you're going to be back. I was like, he should be back any
it's
second
usually
now.
whenever I check my phone.
Yeah. Well, you popped back in about 30 seconds.
It's weird because I can hear like when you've lost me, I can hear you still
Okay.
talking for a little while.
Okay.
And that's usually the hint that I know I'm about to go.
Yeah.
But really the only thing that I think that could get this episode banned, and I don't know if you want to cut that out, when we were talking about your former SAD guy talking about breaking jaws, essentially, like
I
what when
know.
we're
I've
what
talked
we're
about that.
all right, well then, if they're
Past
fine with,
episodes. Yeah.
hey, if they're fine with that, then we're good. And if they do ban it, I blame the CIA. It wasn't
I
me.
blame the CIA. Yeah.
I
No,
blame.
it's they only ban for the alleged conspiracies around the win of our glorious leader, President Biden. But it's, you can tell I was like, and here I am second guessing which episodes I can upload. I mean, that's all their end goal is to make you self censor, which I refuse to do. But so you know what? I'll upload it. I don't think we've touched on it. I mean, what conspiracy is there? I mean, President Biden is our president. He's our
Yeah,
glorious
the
leader.
forbidden subject. I don't even,
He's our
I don't,
glorious leader. I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah,
Fuck Donald Trump. Our glorious leader is in charge.
exactly. And as a realist that, thinks that, essentially old boys networks and whatnot are going to run the show no matter what. Personally, I don't care about elections at all because it's just, as long as we have a senior executive service, it doesn't really matter who you vote for because they can't fire anyone there anyway.
And that was the black pill that I didn't want to swallow, but finally took down. And in a weird way, you can kind of, if you take a little bit of a black pill, not a full one, if you take a little bit of a black pill, it actually works as a kind of like a vaccine, and it almost turns into a white pill.
It does, because that's when you start, once you realize what the senior executive service is, and we stop saying the deep state, and we start, we named a demon, names have power.
Yeah.
Once we start naming this, we start talking about this. Yeah. Once we start naming this and talking about it more, it really doesn't matter. That is the white pill, is that, that the reason they've gotten away with it for so long is because no one's cared to look.
No one knows. Yeah, right. The first thing is admitting you have a problem. Be
Yep.
like, I am an alcoholic and I need to stop. First step.
That's where America's at right
Everything
now. The entire
before,
country is basically an alcoholic right now.
Everything before that is, I only drink on weekends, dude. And it's like, nope, you're still, nope. It's when you finally go, I have a fucking problem and I need to get my life together. You go, now we can work. Now we can work. We still have a long way to go, but now you can work, right? It's up until, I just got a little drunk with my friends over the weekend, dude. And it's like, dude, you're 55 and you're face down in a Toys R Us parking lot. It's like,
yeah. You're
not just having fun. This is a problem. You're like, okay, I'll see you next year. We'll try again. But that's what we need to do. Maybe I just need to like dress up as a priest and do like exorcism of Emily Rose and just be like, name yourself. And then I'll have you dressed up as Emily Rose and you're just reading the plum book and I'll be throwing holy water onto you.
Either that or, I was thinking if, the whole geopolitical analysis thing doesn't work out and the country goes to crap, I'll change my name to Juan Diego and I'll become a Jesuit priest and I'll go back to the original and
I'll just go right back to the beginning. No, what I'll do, and it's funny how you talked about like moving and like going and diving. Like for me, there's always just been this like, do I just take the podcast to Hawaii and just eat beans and rice and be like, fuck it?
The internet's a little bit shoddy out there sometimes. It's a little bit worse than mine even here right now. But you could do it.
There is, but part of me, it's like going into your boss's office with your blackmail. Part of me is just like, it doesn't matter if it worked. I just couldn't die even being happy. I want to die knowing I fought the system.
See, I would be very happy if I could be left alone in Southeast Asia. I'd just be doing underwater photography and doing like breathing exercises underwater. No one can talk to me. Yeah, it is.
Funner fighting.
It is fun to fight.
Fighting.
And that's why it's like, for me, it's, when I saw, Trump get elected and I started to see, hey, there's actually going to be some people stand up to this, because I just figured America was just going to go along with it. Well, guess what? I love an adversarial zero-sum game and I don't like to lose. So, your terms are accepted. I'm coming back to the States and I'm going to make sure that my family has what it takes to come out on top of this.
Yeah. How I'm kind of looking at it is like, we had Trump, right? We were playing the game on easy. And now we just flipped it up to veteran. And it's like, are you really going to throw your controller just because the game went to veteran? Or it's like, you want to nut up and go, best 2 out of 3. So that's how I'm trying to view this, is I'm like, okay, wild card. All right,
Yeah.
they came in little surprised last November.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
a multi-generational conflict. You know,
yeah, you
right now
go.
we're Moses going into the desert saying, "Hey, we got to raise 2 generations worth of
Yeah,
infantry to go and freaking knock these guys
yeah.
down."
Do you really
And,
want to rage
we can
quit?
do it.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
really want to rage quit, or do you want to be like, all right, let's start fucking, let's set up a perimeter? And it's like, it's so much because the way I look at it is like when we die, like at least I believe it's like I think I'll have all the time to go be the spirit. I'll be able to go as a spirit, live in the ethereal equivalent of
Yeah.
Hawaii.
We got time to rest when we're dead. And,
Yeah, yeah.
we don't have
It's
a whole lot of time here. So we might as well
I
just,
think we're here playing the
enjoy the
game.
adrenaline and let's play the game.
I think we're in the Super Bowl, and it's like, dude, win or lose, you can go to Disney World with your family next week. That's the afterlife. You
Yeah.
can go, you
Yeah.
can go you can go be a spirit for 10,000 years and fly amongst the galaxies.
But while you're here, why wouldn't you be the man in the arena?
We're
Like,
in
why wouldn't you
exactly,
be that guy?
yes, we're in the Super Bowl. Like, fuck yeah, give me that cortisol shot so I can't feel my torn ligament. Like, let's go get a Lombardi trophy. That's
Yeah.
how I kind of view it. It's like we're in the game. I really do think that like Earth is like we're in the game. Like you have eternity to not play the game, but it's like you're here, fucking
Pop an EpiPen and let's
yeah,
go. Like,
yeah,
let's
check your ammo, check your grenade count. You know, do you have any airdrops left? Like, grab a sentry. Okay, who's around you? Okay, I got an M60 with an ACOG. Like, okay, you'll be sniper. Let's go set up a perimeter. Like, we're here to play. That's what I think. I truly think that we're here to play the game.
Yeah, you might as well learn how to love the game and
Yeah.
what position in that game you want to play because
Yeah.
we're here for it.
Yeah,
There's no way of getting around it. You can
Yeah.
you can be an emu or an ostrich and you can
Yeah.
try to stick your head down and but if you do that, don't be surprised when you end up with a dick in your ass. You know?
Exactly. It's exactly right. It's like I'm going up to my my friend's house in a couple days, and like I love going up there and we get some fucking cheap beer and pizza and we play shitty Xbox 360 games. And that's fun. And anyone else might go, that's pathetic. And I go, no, it's fun because I only do it like 3 times a year. Other than that, I'm grinding on the podcast every day. That's fun for a little bit. So this whole idea of like being peaceful, I don't want to be a part of this global game. No, I think the global game is what makes the peace fun, makes the peace enjoyable.
Deterrence is the language of peace. If you don't have the ability to deter violence, well, guess what? You're
well, not even that. It's like I think I'd blow my brains out if I like retired to like Hawaii. I think I'll enjoy it for like.
Oh yeah, I would have drank myself to death.
Exactly,
no question about it. I would have just straight drank myself to death. But
your own new enemies to fight.
The only reason I was going down that route anyway is because I'm looking at Hillary Clinton and a New York Democrat, and I'm like, well,
I don't want to play.
Well, if I'm going to play the game, I might as well play it from Asia because at least I know the Filipinos like to fight. Like it's something like that.
Yeah. So I don't know, and we'll wrap this up in a couple minutes because I'm fucking starving. But we'll definitely do another episode. We'll definitely do a million more episodes, dude. You have become a senior executive service member of my podcast. You have become part of the unelected.
Listen, I vow right now that if I am ever appointed to a position, I would like the position in the senior executive service of the Senior Executive Service Abolishment Committee. I will work that position for $1 a year until I don't have to show up to work anymore. I promise that.
Or we'll get in there and we'll be like, this is a pretty nifty gig they got going, and we'll be like,
this is a big mansion. We can do a lot of shit.
We'll be like,
rooms,
hey, there
right?
are a lot of rooms, and we'll be like, fuck those pussies. We'll be like, all hail the deep state. Fuck it, I'll take the brand. Hail Moloch.
Cowboy time,
hail Moloch. Let's snort some adrenochrome.
Give me the Knight of Malta sword. Let's start running drugs,
cocaine,
let's cowboys. Let's go.
Shit. Let's do a new war. I'm thinking of a new American century. How about this? Nuclear weapon Chicago. And they're all like, I knew he'd come around. And they pull up videos of the podcast and they're like,
yeah, they're showing us talking shit like, oh, he grows up so fast.
Exactly, really, right? It's like kids. They're like, they grow up so fast. And it's like, remember when you...
all they had to do was cut me in and I'd stop talking shit.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is, though. And that's what I imagined one time when I was on acid, is I was meditating and I was like, what if the real thing is you die and, you get there and in the afterlife, it's like Hitler, it's Mao, it's Hillary, it's Kissinger. And they all see him and they're all like, hey, and you're like, what? And they're like, yeah, no, we had to make the world hell so that you would grow as a spirit. Because if it was peace, how would you ever grow? And you're like, and like, that's the red pill, is that like the worst of the worst is like they're actually like your big brother teaching you a lesson.
Yeah, so something I love about and this is why I'm always a 40K nerd at heart is, the whole theme of it is just satirical grim darkness. The tagline of anything 40K, it always opens up the same way. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And one of my favorite characters in that's called Saint Celestine. And she's basically like this immortal that just kind of keeps coming back. And every time she dies, she has to basically climb up a mountain of her own dead bodies from all the times she's been killed until she and battles demons and stuff until she gets so badass again that she can just punch back into the materium and start tearing crap up again.
Fuck yeah.
And so, that's the mindset I like to adopt is, there's always going to be a fight. You might as well learn to love it.
Yeah. It's you can't stop the waves. You might as well learn to surf, right? It's
exactly.
I kind of view the world like this in like almost like a spiritual way. And it's, I was thinking like Navy SEAL, like buds or like Delta selection, right? If you went through like buds or something, or okay, well, for me, my experience, going through like fraternity pledgeship, the entire, you're like, this thing's so fucked. You're like, there's no way we can do anything right. We just get it wrong no matter what. We end up getting hazed and hit and they throw beer on us. When you finally get initiated and you realize that like they wouldn't have allowed you to be a pledge if they didn't like you, and you realize that this whole illusion of them hating you was just an illusion. In reality, they're like, no, man, we just had to make sure that you were worth it, and you're like, oh, fuck. When you get out, you don't all of a sudden go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to fix pledgeship so it's no longer this. You go, the beatings do continue and the morale does improve. Yeah. And you go, oh.
Or in this case, the green on blue continues until morale improves.
So it's like, it's like if you got out of Navy SEAL buds, you wouldn't finish it and go, now let's abolish it. You'd go, oh, it's not supposed to be fixed. It's what produces the gems. Part of me thinks when, if you die, you'd look at it and you go, oh, there's supposed to be eternal warfare. Earth is buds. You're like, you're not supposed to fix it. It's supposed to be fucked. That's how you create diamonds.
Right back to Counter-Strike, how do you know who you want on your team? Well, you call them a faggot. And if they have a problem with that, they're not going to make it,
Exactly. You call them a faggot and you punch them in the dick. And if the next day you're like, hey, bro, sorry. And they're like, no worries, man. That's your boy, right? It's the people that you can't. My best friends are the ones that I've physically punched in the face and they've punched me in the face. And we've gone on a year-long no speak treatment. Those are my friends, right?
Exactly. How else are you going to know who you can trust, man?
Exactly. It's what I've done is before. I was like, I've started episodes before and I've been like, well, just to make sure that this episode's a cool one, let's all stop being faggot retards. And I can see if the guest is like, I'm like, all right, I'm never having this guy on again. But if they're just like, and it's like,
right.
Like, fuck yeah. All right.
That's why I always say lean in. When in doubt, lean into it and use their words, their policy, and momentum against them.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, man, you might get this episode banned. And I'm like, why? Because we're being faggots? It's like, you really just jump on in.
Hey, I hate to say it, but, you're close enough to my generation. I grew up being a shitlord on the internet, and I have no intention of changing. No, it's just the policy guys that want me to change. And guess what? I'm a lot more stubborn than they are.
Yeah. I grew up with, you get fucked, faggot. I fucked your mom. Like that's, we've been trained since the beginning, right?
Yeah.
To like not let it happen. So it's, man. But I'm fucking starving and I can smell good food. So let's wrap this one.
I'm with you, man. And just let me know whenever you want to do a part 2, talk about drugs or, any of that crazy stuff. I'm down.
Fuck yeah, man. We'll definitely get into it again. So let's wrap this bitch up. David O'Neill, thank you, my friend. And it won't be up on YouTube until next week, but it'll be up on BitChute and Rumble later today. I'll send you the link.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Trying to pimp your podcast out whenever I can, and it was a pleasure, Tommy.
Thanks, man. Please keep pimping it out, and let's grow this bitch. And I don't know why I'm acting like this is goodbye. I'll just text you in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
All right,
overtaking Rogan, though. That's the important part.
That's what we're doing. We're running this bitch. All right, dog. Take it easy, man.